across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good afternoon to you. It's just after 1 o'clock on Tuesday, August the 11th. I'm David Bull in for Ian Collins. Round 2. Yes, I'm here for this week and next week as well. And thank you very much indeed for your company. We have a lot to get through this afternoon. And also, just before we do start, thank you so much for all your amazing messages yesterday. I spent quite a lot of last night replying to them. So thank you very much. It's lovely to be back with the talkTV family. So thank you once again. Now, let's look at the top stories. Police are probing a possible link between Anne Widdecombe's murder and an incendiary device pushed through Nigel Farage's letterbox. As figures show, 96% of MPs have faced abuse and over a quarter have faced death threats. So I'm asking this afternoon, what price do we put on democracy? Labour has now overtaken Reform in the polls for the first time in 18 months, edging ahead 24% to 22%. That is actually Farage's lowest score in over a year. And Britain has become the first country in Europe to approve a new weight loss pill dubbed a treatment for life, with 20 million Britons potentially eligible. Well, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much indeed for your company. I'm delighted to say that an old friend of mine joins me this afternoon, Charlie Rowley. Good afternoon.
An old friend.
Old friend. Well, aren't you?
We're still friends.
No, I didn't mean you're an old friend. An ex-friend. We are still friends.
We are. It's like old times.
It is like old times. Weekend breakfast, here we go again.
I know, yeah. I know. I remember trotting into the studio, you sitting there as gorgeous and glamorous as you do today.
Well, so I had complaints yesterday because apparently my shirts aren't floral enough.
Well,
compared with what I used to wear.
But the weekend was slightly different to the week, but you look incredibly smart and incredibly beautiful. So,
as do you. Right, the Mutual Admiration Society is now over. Let's just change gear a bit, because this story, as you know, and you and I worked with Anne Widdecombe very closely, it's hit me really hard, and I think all of us really hard. You know, when I was in the European Parliament, I think you know this, Anne and I used to go for dinner, just two of us, and she would regale me with these amazing tales of who she'd worked with and, you know, the antics she got up to. Let me tell you, Anne Widdecombe liked a drink. She loved a glass of red wine, and she loved a whiskey late at night. And so when the news broke of Anne Widdecombe's horrific murder, and it is nothing short of horrific, a 78-year-old murdered in her own home. I mean, it beggars belief, actually. And obviously we've started to try to come to terms with what happened. And now police are investigating whether the man charged with murdering Anne Widdecombe was also responsible for this firebombing, for this incendiary device, on Nigel Farage's home. Now, this becomes even more extraordinary when you then read that the counter-terrorism police have referred themselves to the IOPC. So I don't want to dwell on this particularly, but the question, and I suppose the reason that I'm so caught up in it is because I'm in it. And you then start to ask yourself, what price is democracy? So when I was a member of the European Parliament, we had a special line called Operation Bridger, where you would call and you get specialist police support immediately to your home. Many of us have panic alarms that go straight to the police station, for example. But when you look at the amount of money that we spend protecting politicians in this country, something like 4 to 6 million, another 31 million in contingency, and Reform is saying, well, we need to spend £100 million. But I suppose the bigger question is, why on earth would anyone be a politician?
Well, you're right. That is the ultimate question, because, you know, it's changed even over the last, 10 years. And, you know, I mean, I remember, just anecdotally, my first job was working for an MP, and, we felt bombarded by just auto-generated emails that would come in, campaign emails that would come in, and we thought, my word, this is an awful lot of work. But now, with the explosion of social media and the direct messaging, the direct communication that MPs and MEPs would have done back then as well, would have received, which is filled with hate, filled with bile, filled with abuse, because somebody disagrees with you on something. The ability and the just mentality of people to be able to just fire off a message, and they could be robots, you know, they could be, but a lot of the time they're not. These are people that live among us who feel able and willing and determined to fire off those kinds of messages of abuse, which then, on its own, you know, there's a fine line, obviously, between, you know, policing tweets and free speech and all of the rest of it. But it's when you then, and the majority of people, clearly, if they saw you in the street, would probably be perfectly polite to you.
Yeah, they'd never say that to you.
They'd never say that to you, and they'd probably have a little joke about it in the pub and say, oh, you know, I might have fired off a few, but I did see him down the street or her down the street, and actually they're actually quite nice. But it's the people who then capitalise and go too far on what they've seen on social media, who then become completely deranged and then start to send more than just messages.
And do you think politics has become far more toxic? The reason I ask that is, as you know, I've been on this tour around the country for the last year and a bit. I had 3 incidents where I was attacked, physically attacked. 2 of them were in an airport. Luckily, I had someone with me to look after me. But the very idea, and this was in Scotland, by the way, the very idea that I got off an aircraft in a protected area, in an airport, and was physically assaulted, I think is totally unacceptable. And I don't know whether politics has changed, or people feel that they are empowered to do that, or indeed that politicians, and you may disagree with what I stand for or what lots of people stand for, but, you know, to actually act in that way is totally unacceptable.
And yeah, absolutely, look, there is no defence or justification for anybody that, you know, physically assaults anybody, let alone someone that is in public life, or someone that, you know, puts their day, you know, puts themselves day to day through having to make difficult decisions, having to engage with all kinds of different groups of people, whether it's trade unions, whether it's charity groups, whether it's local constituents, whether it's campaign organisations, whoever they are, you know, you are front and centre of just wanting to make a difference. Whatever your politics, ultimately, the majority of people, overwhelming majority of people that get into politics are people that want to do things as they see for the better. But in answer to your question, is it more toxic? Yes, it is. Because I think, you know, we're now in a situation because of advertising and, again, social media. People have got to get messages quickly. People have got to have information condensed in as small a number of, you know, words and letters and phrases as possible. And when you don't see results, so, you know, whether it's smash the gangs, stop the boats, and none of that happens, people have a right to feel angry that actually politicians haven't delivered what they say they're going to do. But because it's, you know, been reduced to such a bite-sized level of information, and then, of course, you've got to create dividing lines with your opponents, with your political parties, and therefore, you know, if the media don't responsibly necessarily report what a party is doing or a particular politician, or if a politician, more to the point, is probably being irresponsible with the truth of another party, saying, you know, for example, and I remember this during, actually, I think the last general election campaign, you know, the Labour Party put out leaflets that said that Rishi Sunak wanted paedophiles to be freed from... Now, of course he didn't. Of course he didn't. That was just an abhorrent, ridiculous kind of campaign to try and attract voters to say, actually, it's wider than, you know, it's about early prison releases, which I know is topical right now. But the idea that you say that, you know, Rishi Sunak was happy to have paedophiles, you know, freed and released early, it was totally wrong. But that was a kind of a campaign, you know, attempt to turn people off from the Tories and to destabilise them. When we see too much of that, because people believe
then what happens is you get amplification, so people retweet. But also, one of the other things that I have a major problem with, people don't actually read the tweet before they then retweet that, so they have no idea what they're actually propagating, and we see that time and time again. I'll actually put politicians into that as well, because certain politicians are firing stuff off late at night when they should know better than to do so. And actually, I just think we need to take a step back and realise that people are in politics for a reason, and that is to try to make the country better. Whether you are on the left or the right or in the centre, everyone has a shared goal, which is to make this country better.
Absolutely. And look, you know, I know people, you know, media is a different ballgame, and you've got to, you know, get views, and you've got to have good debates, and you've got to see, and you've got to balance the arguments, and that's absolutely the right thing to do. And you've got to challenge people, and you've got to scrutinise their ideas, absolutely, and as hard as you possibly can in some circumstances. But there are other occasions, I feel, certainly not here, because, you know, this is the home of common sense, and we do it properly here. But there are just other occasions that I've noticed where you know, you will get someone who is built... I mean, look, take this Jason Hardy character, just very quickly, you know, who is a complete charlatan, that hasn't done any of the things that he claims to have said. But you will get people who appear on your screens, and I'm not now going down this tangent just to justify my own experience, but, you know, you'll be maybe sat next to someone in a debate who happens just to be a podcast host. Of a left-wing variety. And you sort of, you know, hear them with one single-minded view, and they're not open-minded enough to find a solution to something. You know, they just want to come on and tell you how terrible you are, you're on the right, or how terrible you are, you voted, you know, Reform or Conservative in the past, or, you know, you're the problem. And they don't bring any solution because they're not able to engage properly in finding a solution, having a debate, being able to be persuaded or change your mind in particular.
And that, for me, is the key. You should play the ball, not the man or the woman. And that is something I'm seeing more and more and more, which is, you're right, people go in with an entrenched idea as to their point of view, and that you, because you sit on the right of the centre, are a nasty person, and therefore everything you say is basically something you can ignore.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we've got to get to a point, I think, where absolutely encourage debate. Absolutely there is division in this country, but we've still got to find, you know, and the right solutions, just so the public can then actually see, well, look, if you are someone that's on the left who thinks that, you know, the illegal boat crossings, if you still maintain the view that actually, you know, all of them are refugees and, you know, fleeing persecution, right, well, then you expose that person. I don't agree with that. I don't think the figures back that up, and I don't think that's right at all. But if that's their view, and it might be the Lib Dem view, it might be... I can't remember, I've forgotten the name now, but she was on not too long ago and she was still presenting that view at breakfast. Right, fine. So we've exposed the view of, say, you know, I don't want to speak for them, but say the Liberal Democrats, as it happened to be at the time. Brilliant. So the public know exactly where they stand with that view and that politician, and they haven't got the right solutions.
Right, let's move on and talk about the latest polls. So Labour has now overtaken Reform UK. The polls for the first time in 18 months show that Labour is now on 24%, 2 points ahead of Nigel Farage's party on 22%. Now, what's interesting about this is clearly there is some crossover going on, but Labour seems to be getting a bounce, partly because you have a new Prime Minister and you always get a bounce, although the bounce isn't as big as we thought it might be, but it seems to be coming from the Green Party, and many people who I think were enticed by Zach Polansky have now gone over to Labour. And just in terms of that, there's another article today saying Andy Burnham is going to raise taxes by £25 billion. Now, remember, the Labour Party says they're not going to increase tax, national insurance or VAT. Now, where are they going to get all this cash for? Because he keeps coming out with loads of policies, which I've written here about VAT cuts to electricity bills, capping bus fares at £2. What else? Sorting out social care, which is going to be the biggest problem of all. Scrapping the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. If you've got a £25 billion hole that you need to fill, then you are miles off the manifesto and the mandate that Labour has to govern. So therefore, I put it to you, he needs to call a general election.
I think that's, you know, absolutely right. You know, I think you're absolutely right. Will he do that? I don't think so, because I think he wants the 3 years until the end of the parliamentary term to be Prime Minister still. But you're absolutely right. You know, if he strays from the manifesto, which, you know, Labour were elected on, then of course you've got someone who is just, you know, governing by diktat, doing his own thing, which nobody asked for, nobody voted for, nobody backed. And therefore you should be calling for a general election. I think people who are doing absolutely the right thing. But it is interesting, you know, that he... I mean, look, if he didn't have a bounce, if he didn't have a lead...
But it's not that big.
It's not, you know, but it's...
it's a modest bounce.
It's modest, you know, and I think people, you know, are slightly cautious because obviously I think people know that he's, you know, been parachuted into, you know, into Parliament through the Makerfield by-election. He's avoided any kind of...
Well, he parachuted himself in,
well,
but yeah.
Absolutely. He's avoided a Labour leadership contest, so we haven't actually heard any of these plans before, and I think people might have raised an eyebrow about that. He hasn't then, obviously... you know, been able to go to Parliament because it's now not sitting because it's summer recess, so he's avoiding scrutiny in the House of Commons. So I think people are raising an eyebrow and still slightly reserving judgment while they're happy to have these sweets being handed out over the summer for all the examples that you just gave. But people, I think, are still... holding tight to know where is the money coming from, and that's the key question.
Now, there's a really good article in the Times, actually, today, saying that even though, and I spoke to John Curtis about this, he said, oh, well, it's going to be in 3 years' time, the election. But actually, this writer, James Johnson, makes a very good case to say that reform may well have peaked, that actually reform isn't in a position to fight a general election, that Burnham has a bounce. Now is the time to call a general election. And I think there is some methodology behind that. And I think it would be very interesting to see what he would do if he did call a general election. And, of course, the other thing is that every time we have a Prime Minister, and we've had, what, 7 in 10 years, and if you are changing your manifesto, if you change your manifesto, should that automatically trigger a general election?
Look, I mean, I'm not sure, and I'm not... the reason why I'm slightly holding back is because I think if you really do stray, if you're a new person and you really do stray, then there's an argument for it. But I still maintain the age-old sort of terms and conditions of that, which is that
you're there representing the party, not yourself.
That and also the fact that you might generally, because of a national emergency or something, you might just have to tear up the manifesto instead of saying, right, I'm going to come in and make all these tax cuts, but then all of a sudden you're hit by a pandemic, for example. You might actually have to raise a bit more cash. You can't then just have a general election because we face a war or conflict or something means that you have to change course, and therefore that shouldn't necessarily trigger a general election.
Charlie, thank you for the moment. Let me just put these questions to you, if I may, at home. So, if you change your manifesto, do you think that should automatically trigger a general election? 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can send a WhatsApp as well. You can follow us on X at talkTV. Also, the question I posed right at the beginning, what price on democracy? How much are we willing to spend to protect members of Parliament? So we're talking at the moment about 6 million plus another 31 million, so 37 million. Should it go up to 100 million? What price do you actually put on democracy? Get in touch with all your points as well, please. Charlie is staying with me throughout the break, and we'll continue our conversation after this. This is Talk.
We've been on the beaches for 2 days running. Both days we've been hassled by the local French police. They've turned up armed to the teeth, looking very aggressive. We've had to arm ourselves, actually, with gas masks. They're checking our ID, wanting to know what we're doing here. They should show as much enthusiasm, I think, with the migrants. They seem to be waving them through and hassling us. But this morning, they asked for my ID. I told them to clear off. I said, you got it yesterday. You're not hassling me on the beach on my morning stroll.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 121. David Bull in for Ian Collins. I'm joined by Charlie Rowley. Let me just tell you this brilliant message. Oh, my goodness. I'm just paraphrasing this. Dr. David, sheer bliss. Now, the last time I watched you and the lovely Charlie...
Very kind.
It was your last Christmas on TV and Charlie was dressed as a Christmas elf. It's Pat. Do you remember Pat?
Oh, I do.
Yeah. So she said, Pat says we've missed you. Pat, we've missed you too. Charlie's going to be wearing that later.
Yes. Yeah. In this 30-degree heat.
Yes, it is quite warm in here. I was just remarking on that. Lots of messages coming in. Keep all these messages coming in, please. I'm saying, you know, if you have a divergent manifesto, like a completely different manifesto, as we seem to be seeing from Andy Burnham, who's tacking hugely left, should there be a general election? Let me know your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. What price do we put on democracy as well? Why would anyone go into politics? And actually, just on that note, if one of my nephews or nieces said to me, would you advise going into politics? I'm not sure I would say yes.
Yeah, no, I think I would have reservations too if I was advising anybody these days, you know. And there was a time where I, quite fancied it, you know. I have been a candidate.
I know you have. I was going to bring that up.
Oh, well.
And you may be again.
I'm not, well, not sure, because you've got to really, and I think this is the problem, you know, you've got to, want to really do something. I think that's the key now. If you want to be in politics, you've got to go in for a reason, which is changing something that means a lot to you. It's not just being able to, I think, you know, as able as lots of people are to be able to deal with multiple, you know, whether it's housing, whether it's health, whether it's, you know, education, whether it's the economy, whether it's whatever it is that you've got on your desk in your in-tray, and you're able to fix things. I think now you've got to overwhelm, or to keep you going, basically, and to counter all of the hate and the negativity and all the stuff that you've got to do that comes with that. You know, going out to defend colleagues maybe that, you know, have committed the most indefensible of, you know, crimes.
I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. I mean,
you know,
but sometimes you're right.
That,
well, sometimes I have had to defend things that I don't really subscribe to, and it's very difficult for someone, if you actually got some morality about you, or if you are an honest player and, you know, you play with a straight bat, I find that very difficult to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've either got to go into it thinking, right, OK, if you're part of the party, that's fine, but I'm going to be very independent-minded and I want to just get my local hospital, you know, through, or I want to get more homes built in my patch, or I really want to save, you know, this particular charity or this school or whatever it is, my local post office, whatever. Then you go in for those reasons because that keeps you on the straight and narrow and determined enough to achieve something, and you can come out probably with your head held high and all of the abuse will sort of just fade away.
And you see, so I think you're right in that, and I've had this conversation with a number of people, which is actually, people are quite rude about backbench MPs, but I think there's something quite rewarding about being a really good backbench MP, where you look after your constituents and actually deal with the post office, the pub, whatever it is, the farmers, whatever.
Absolutely, and they get all the sort of, you know, the pit squeezed on them, if that's the right term. You know, they get all the screws turned on them, you know, if they sort of don't vote the right way. You know,
right.
the whips will say, come on, you've got to vote. Oh, you know, you'll never have a career, you'll never get on.
Good, I want to be a minister.
Exactly. And so the people that actually, even though they come under the most pressure, but I think are ultimately the most respected at the end of their political careers, are people who just, you know, keep on the straight and narrow, they know what they want to do, they go in and deliver it, they're backbench MPs, they're good backbench MPs, and people love them for it.
I agree. Now, a huge issue. Yesterday we showed this dinghy coming across, not such a small boat, 230. I mean, it's the number of passengers on a 737, I believe. You know, it's an absolutely disgrace. Now, France's lifeboat services warn there is no limit to the number of migrants that people smugglers will put on a boat. 230 yesterday. The previous record was 165. It seems that, and I mentioned this yesterday, that the French, I know we've spent £800 million, I'm not quite sure what the French are doing, but they seem to have, in some ways, have stopped the smaller boats, or at least we're now seeing larger boats coming from China. They're going in through European countries, and then they're picking people up along the coast. Now, we saw Operation Fortress being launched by Reform UK. Sarah Poachin came on yesterday. She said, we're going to turn the boats back. We're going to stick, you know, an armada in the English Channel. I just don't see how that works, and I don't know what the answer is. I mean, the answer clearly is to make sure you detain and you process, you deport, and you make it very clear that if you come here, you will not be able to get, you know, vouchers to go roller skating.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Look, there is not one single thing that is going to be the silver bullet sort of stopping all of this. It's a multiple of things, and that does include, you know, getting to the heart of where these dinghies are coming from, so stopping, perhaps the manufacturing of them, if you can in China, although I think that's highly unlikely, but stopping them making the the shipping route that they come through when they actually arrive in Europe, so, having maybe tougher, import controls, through the lorries that come into Europe from China, for example, to making sure that actually those dinghies, we know, who needs a mega dinghy, right? It's not going to be you or me or or Finn, out there. We don't need these mega dinghies.
I mean, you'd be showing off if you had a dinghy that size.
Exactly, unless we all go up the Thames for a talk party.
Well, that sounds quite nice.
Which actually in this weather would be. There you go, he's nodding.
He's paying for the booze.
Yeah. But apart from that, we don't need them.
No,
so why on earth are they coming into Europe?
Because people are making money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so if you seize, you should be able to seize these dinghies at import control, just as you would Class A drugs, or for example.
But then I saw all these multiple agencies involved with making sure that everyone was safe. I mean, it is literally a taxi service. I know we've talked about that a great deal. And, of course, the cost to the Exchequer and to us as taxpayers is utterly enormous, and nothing is happening. And I don't see any kind of will from the government to stop it. I mean, the only one that possibly has any stake in this is Shabana Mahmood, who at least looks like she's trying to do something.
Well, to an extent. I mean, she has been tough in terms of, people who are here already, in terms of their, leave to remain, extending that to sort of 10 years and, increasing the amount, I think, that you have to earn before you can even apply for citizenship and be in the country. And that does, deter people. That does make people think twice, or people, it only attracts people that we really want in this country, and that people that might be skilled and people able to support themselves and want to give back to the country. But I think it goes back to the if I was in the Labour Party, right? If I was a Labour cabinet minister under Starmer, I mean, I wouldn't have got rid of the Rwanda scheme.
Neither would I.
I would have just said, you know what?
Let's see if it works.
Let's see if it works. This is a Tory, even though I might disagree,
I totally
but they
agree.
pumped a load of taxpayers' money into it. Let's just see if it's a deterrent. Of course, you're never going to be able to put the numbers of people that come into the country illegally, which is about 90-odd thousand people.
And of course we did see an exodus of people, didn't we? We saw them leaving, going back into the EU because they were worried they were going to be deported to Rwanda.
Absolutely. And so that's why I'm not against having patrols in the Channel, whether it's...
Neither am I.
I wouldn't have necessarily a naval submarine that could be better spent on actual...
Well, I tried to say a Type 45 destroyer is £1 billion worth of kit, which you're going to stick in the Channel.
Yeah, but, I mean, I'm sure there are sort of smaller, naval vessels.
We do have some smaller ones.
Yeah, which can, patrol, which just offer a deterrent. And that's the numbers, because we deal with the numbers that we can see, which are the people that come in into the country, and the numbers of people that we have to deport. I mean, this one-in, one-out scheme is completely nonsense, because it's more in than it is out at the minute, I think.
It's definitely more in.
And it's only about 1,000 people each way, which is not anywhere near, dealing with the problem.
But even if you work that through, what we get at the end of that is asylum seekers, so we will always get the same number.
Yeah.
Whoever signed that deal is absolutely bonkers.
Well, that was Keir Starmer.
Well, I know that, but I mean...
and Shabana Mahmood.
I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary. Just very quickly, I don't know how much time we've got left, but we talk a lot about net zero. We emit 1% of global emissions, and of course everyone's very excited and building windmills all over the place, and of course the grid cannot cope. This is utterly ridiculous. So you would have thought you'd upgrade the grid before you actually put the windmills in, wouldn't you? But the cost to consumers of paying wind farms to switch off because the grid can't cope has now cost already this year £1 billion. Now, the reason for that is, A, the network can't cope with that kind of electricity, and secondly, because they have to fire up the gas-fired power stations, and of course, because of the Iranian conflict, that is now much more expensive. I mean, none of this has been thought through at all, has it? And they're just talking about the numbers, just the sheer cost of doing this. It's going to cost £3.2 billion in this coming year just to upgrade some of the electricity infrastructure in this country. What are we doing?
Well, that is the question. What have we been doing? So, I mean, obviously the story is about windmills, but you can extend that to waterways and, the pipes that, keep sort of, bursting now, which is obviously why water companies...
or lack of reservoirs.
And lack of reservoirs, exactly. And that's... So when people, when we know now we've got about £3 trillion worth of debt, right, that we have to pay, we pay more in our debt interest than we do on defence, where we're now spending even more money, if that's the case, if that's Burnham's plans, we're going to be spending more, borrowing more, taxing more, and yet we have got none of these infrastructure projects in place, whether it's the grid, that's been reformed, whether it's our waterways, again, whether it's our reservoirs, whether it's nuclear power stations that we should have been, be up and running. There is no contingency, no infrastructure has been built, and yet we're just supplying, but we're only going to be increasing the debt. These things don't pop up overnight.
No.
So this is going to...
And also, if interest rates go up even higher, then, of course, the debt then mounts.
Exactly.
Did you see this Trump feat? Did you see what Trump did?
I heard about it.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's an absolutely brilliant story. This is Donald Trump. So he was mounting Air Force One, and American intelligence agencies had flagged a plot by Iranian proxy forces to target the president's plane, right? So there he is on Air Force One. He gets on Air Force One and waves to everyone, and then the journalists start to board the aircraft through the back door, and then Trump got off the other side and went into a meal cart, got taken down on the side of Air Force One and put into a different plane and flew off from there. The container was lowered. He went into a modified Boeing 757. It was a decoy Air Force One. They even had different call signs, and this is because they believe that threat to be real. I mean, it is a brilliant story straight out of a spy novel.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a film, a blockbuster. We all go and see. Once we've had our trip down the Thames.
Well, that's right, in our boat.
Had our talk party. But you're absolutely right. But that is when, you know, the intelligence services really do obviously come into their own. They have to have all of these contingencies in place to protect politicians. Now, obviously,
we go back full circle.
Absolutely, and obviously he's the most, you know, powerful man in the world. You know, whoever holds that office, they've got to be protected. And you know, even though I know Donald Trump has been targeted probably more than most, but he has been targeted more than most in recent history in terms of US presidents, and he's had a close run call, you know, of a gunshot just, you know, brushing his ear. So
I was on air when that happened. I remember.
I mean, it's, you know, and again, these people live among us. So you've got the security services who have got to make, you know, really tough decisions. I mean, we think politicians have to make difficult decisions, but the people protecting them have probably got to make even more, you know, the tougher ones at that critical stage. So, you know, credit to the services for getting him out of that situation. Should it have proved to be a real threat?
What a brilliant story. You're right. It should be a movie. Donald Trump in a shot, you know, in a meal cart being lowered down off Air Force One. Brilliant.
I mean, it's the next James Bond, isn't it?
It is the next James Bond.
I think they're still auditioning, aren't they?
Well, I think you should go for it.
Well, you know, the name's Bond.
You've been very good. Charlie, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Really good to see you.
Charlie
Thank you.
Rowley, thank you very much indeed. After the break, we're going to be talking again about what price do we put on democracy. Obviously, I'm talking about Anne Widdecombe, the just shocking murder of Anne Widdecombe, and the plots against high-profile politicians, including Nigel Farage, and plots against many members of Parliament. I'm thinking about David Amess, I'm thinking about Joe Cox as well. What price do we put on that? We'll be talking to Will Geddes after this break, who's a security specialist. Do get in touch, please, with all your thoughts on all of the topics that we've been talking about. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. I'm David Bull, in for Ian Collins all week and next week, by the way, as well. Lots of messages coming in. Dave in London. Good afternoon, David. Good to see you back on Talk. Thank you very much indeed. Concerning the boats, with all the problems that everybody is pointing out with the boats, is this not pointing towards it all being a deliberate act? We're paying France to bring the migrants here, not to stop them. 800 million quid, as far as I'm aware. I mean, the French would say they have intercepted the smaller boats. We are seeing larger and larger boats. And actually, there was a great graphic this morning in one of the newspapers showing just the size of the boats and how they've escalated over the years. But, I mean, I have spoken to so many people who are literally pulling their hair out saying, why doesn't anyone do anything about it? We're just attracting more and more people. The United Kingdom is far too attractive to people who are in a safe country, i.e. France. Paul, this is Paul in Southend. Good afternoon to you. What needs to be done to stop this crisis is to remove anyone arriving on a boat the thing they value the most, their freedom. You put them in secure camps, no phones, TV, internet, no contact with the public. I'm asking this afternoon, what price do we put on democracy? That's the great thing about this country. We are supposedly a free, democratic, independent, sovereign country. What price do we put on democracy? 0344 499 1000. Joining me now is Will Geddes, security specialist. Good afternoon, Will.
Afternoon, David.
This is horribly real now, isn't it? You know, David Amis, Joe Cox, Anne Widdecombe. Charlie and I were just talking about this. Obviously, I have a vested interest, given that I've been involved in politics for quite a long time, was a member of the European Parliament, and recently, because of what has happened, I've had close protection with me. It is something I never thought I would see. And there is a big difference between elected members sitting in the House of Commons, but of course there are high-profile politicians from different parties doing different things, whether it was when I was chairman of Reform UK or indeed the chair of the Labour Party or whatever it is. But, you know, it makes you think whether you are really putting your life on the line to try and make the country a better place, regardless of the party you represent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fundamentally the dilemma, David. It's something that every single MP has to deal with, at whatever level they may be. And again, depending on their level, will no doubt aggregate against the numbers of threats that they receive. But let's put it this way. Threats to MPs has increased 3 times since 2019. So pretty much in the space of 7 years, we've just seen an incremental and pretty significant increase. Nowadays, we're looking at least 96% of MPs have received some kind of threatening behavior, whether it be personally, face-to-face, or whether it be via communications. That could be emails, tweets, responses to postings that they've put online on social media. And I think what we're looking at here is, unfortunately, an epidemic of division, if you like, amongst people that are utilizing the forums of social media to either amplify their threats, to seek validation in their disenchantment, their disgruntled feelings, whatever it might be, that we're seeing it now significantly increase. And as a direct result, MPs like yourself are constantly
I'm not an MP, but
yourself. Well, yeah, sorry. But I mean, MPs and those in the public eye. And I think we need to expand this beyond MPs to people in the public eye as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the real difficulty here, isn't it? Which is just in terms of the budget. So we're spending what? So £4 to £6 million. They put a contingency of 31 million on top of that. Now, the question is, should you provide security for every single member of Parliament, 650 members of Parliament? I mean, the budget would be absolutely astronomical. Also, we're meant to live in a free country. I have to say, having close protection, whilst it sounds lovely, is, you know, you take them everywhere with you.
Yeah, it's a terrible intrusion on one's private life.
It is.
And that's from someone who's done it for more than the last 3 decades and provides it for people on a daily basis. The one thing that I always say to every principal is this should only be for an abbreviated period until the threat abates. It shouldn't be something that you hopefully have to live with on a daily basis. Now, going back to your point about 650 odd MPs being protected, all with close protection, well, the bill for that, I did the sums, would be around about 250 million a year, which is a significant amount of money. but also it's that impact on their personal lives. Now, it's not to say MPs aren't given some levels of security, but they have to jump through a number of hoops before that's enhanced to the level of having close protection.
I mean, and obviously we've had 7 prime ministers in 10 years, but when they stand down, they get close protection. Also, I mentioned Operation Bridger, so when I was in the European Parliament, we had a dedicated phone line in case we got into trouble. Many people in politics carry panic buttons as well. I mean, the difficulty here is that there is a big difference to responding, and you will understand this, in a capital city like London, or indeed in Birmingham or Manchester, as there is to responding in the wilds of, you know, rural wherever.
Absolutely. And I mean, and again, those who are in rural whatever are going to have problems with the capability and resource that is available to them from the local police. Now, many MPs will be afforded with what we would call physical security enhancements, and that's like alarms, panic alarms, as you mentioned, enhanced measures around their particular home, including CCTV. But the problem that we've seen, and we saw this both with Joe Cox and David Amos, who mentioned already, David, is that it's possibly a higher risk for them, not when they're at home, sadly, as we saw with the murder of Anne Widdecombe, but more likely when they're conducting their surgeries in their local town or village or wherever it is that they're presiding over.
And my understanding is now that Parliament is providing security at those surgeries, but that is the very epicentre of being a constituency MP, isn't it? The idea that you can talk to your constituents, they air their problems, and you're meant to be there to sort them out.
Yeah, absolutely. And not every member of the electorate is going to be particularly happy with the state of their local environment. So they may not necessarily coming to that surgery with smiles and cuddle.
No,
so
quite.
You're looking also at the capabilities of those that are being provided for that close protection. Now, police officers are one thing. They are not close protection specialists. Let's be very, very clear about that. A close protection specialist has a far greater number of skills which they bring to the table in terms of the protection of an individual rather than law enforcing or safeguarding the general public in a very generic sense. So it's about the capability that's there, and whether that is window dressing or whether it is actually something competent enough to be able to deal with the type of threat that both, sadly, Joe Cox and David Amos faced.
I mean, you're right. I mentioned it earlier. I was assaulted twice in an airport, and it was when I was least expecting it. And obviously, luckily, did have someone with me to try and help me out of that situation. But it's when you least expect it, I think.
It is. But it's also someone who has the capability to be able to pick up on the hostile reconnaissance that usually precurses an attack anyway. And the threat is going to look at on research, whether it be online or physically by following you, find out what your pattern of life is. Where are you living? Where are you going in the mornings? Do you go to the gym first? Do you go and get a coffee from a coffee shop? We are creatures of routine by human nature. And that is exactly what the threat is going to be reviewing or considering, particularly the determined ones, before they carry out their attack. And within that cycle or that pattern of life, they'll be determining where is the most likely location they can successfully execute that attack.
And of course, otherwise it becomes so intrusive, it's not worth doing. And just in terms of where we go from here, one of the things that I'm intrigued about is social media. And I think people find it very easy to insult, to be incredibly toxic towards anyone who's involved in politics, whether on the left or the right, insults thrown around. And it doesn't take a great sort of deal of extrapolation for someone then to act, someone who may not be totally in control of their faculties, to then act on what they are reading and to take it to the next degree.
Absolutely. It's fuel to the fire, David. If there is, there's one of your co-hosts on talkTV who I spoke to this morning to do a welfare check, who's getting a considerable amount of abuse online at the moment because they're very vocal about particular views. Now, the problem is that, we've been afforded free speech, or so we hope in this country, although that's a question at the moment, certainly looking at some recent arrests. But that free speech is being compromised by individuals who are being inflamed by rhetoric and narrative that's being propagated and proliferated across social medias into thinking, great, this validates my hate against David Bull, for an example, or Will Geddes for that matter, and I'm validated, and I've now been endorsed in whatever it is that I may carry out in a malicious means.
I mean, certainly it's made me think twice about an involvement in politics, and I know many of my colleagues feel the same way. Will, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. That's Will Geddes there, a security specialist. This is a really interesting message from David in the Cotswolds. I think, David, politics has become more toxic because politicians have become more toxic, and policies themselves have also become very toxic. If you take the miners' strike in 1984 and the poll tax riots in 1990, I remember both very vividly. Both were viciously bitter, both very violent, both had directly affected people's lives. But now, David, look at what's happening with trans rights, putting men in women's changing rooms, illegal immigration. That is changing, it's destroying the fabric of the country. You've then got two-tier policing, two-tier justice. That then pits the police against a country's citizens. Then you've got rising taxes, sectarian voting, skyrocketing benefits, then anti-Semitism, net zero, the list goes on. And if you consider the beginnings of a collapsing society and the start of civil unrest, we're unfortunately on that very path. David, that is a brilliant message, thank you. He says he's from the Cotswolds, but he's looking to leave. On a lighter note, hi David, Sean in Gloucester. Hello Sean, it's been a long time. Fantastic you're back. How about the government's actually sticking to their manifesto in the first place? Yeah, we're talking about that. If you change your manifesto dramatically from the manifesto you were elected on, then shouldn't that necessarily trigger a general election? And what would actually be the mechanism to do that? Let's take a call. Kevin is in Dorset. Good afternoon to you, Kevin.
Hi, David. I mean, I agree with a lot of what's been said, but I think there needs to be a lot more intelligence and money spent just finding out who is targeting our politicians. As you rightly say, David, the toxicity, the temperature now is so high and it's running so high. And basically, people will not stand, and it will destroy our democracy. We'll lose good people that could serve in Parliament because they're too scared for it. In fact, I actually served in Guernsey's Parliament. I now live back in the UK, and I was thinking of standing, and my wife said, absolutely no. In fact, I got through the first round of checks for it all. And my wife said, you really can't, I'm scared. She said, I will be scared. I don't know what's going to happen. And this is the problem. It's going to destroy the very fabric of our democracy. I mean, obviously, you can't have close protection for every parliamentarian, but I think what we need is the intelligence to know where resources are going to be put.
Oh, I've lost you. I think it's a really good point. There are intelligence services. I won't go into the details of how I know that, but certainly there is monitoring going on of chatter generally of high-profile politicians, those in Parliament, those not in Parliament. But again, you're right. I mean, it does make you think, and I've had that conversation with my own family, saying, well, you know, is it actually worth it to potentially put your life on the line? And I think, particularly for me, just bringing it back to, obviously, Anne and Nigel, who I know or knew Anne very well and know Nigel very well, you know, you do have to ask yourself what price you're paying as a politician when you go into this to try to change the country for the better. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. What price do we put on democracy? And also, just in terms of this, if you have a massive change in terms of the governance of the country, like we have with Andy Burnham, who now seems to be tacking enormously left, which is against the manifesto pledges which were made. So, for example, not going to raise income tax, VAT, national insurance. And now, of course, we look like we're going to have a huge budget yet again. It will dwarf Rachel Reeves's tax-raising hike that she put up. Well, who voted for that? No one is the answer. So should that then trigger a general election? The number 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. We'll take a break. After the break, I'm really keen to hear from you. Lots to discuss this afternoon on everything we've been talking about. Get in touch, and I'll see you in a few minutes.
We've been on the beaches for 2 days running. Both days we've been hassled by the local French police. They've turned up armed to the teeth, looking very aggressive. We've had to arm ourselves, actually, with gas masks. They're checking our ID, wanting to know what we're doing here. They should show as much enthusiasm, I think, with the migrants. They seem to be waving them through and hassling us. But this morning, they asked for my ID. I told them to clear off. I said, you got it yesterday. You're not hassling me on the beach on my morning stroll.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. So many messages coming in on all of this, which I expected, actually. This is from Amanda. Good afternoon to you. I honestly think Reform UK has dropped down in the polls, David, because voters are afraid of saying they actually vote for them, understandably so, due to the recent violence that we have seen. David, politicians who use disgusting attributes to other politicians, scum, dangerous, Nazi, etc., should not get protection. This is Yorkie. Parliament should grow up. I agree. I totally agree. Be respectful, and a lot of attacks on politicians may just recede. And that's the point I was making about play the ball, not the man, and I don't like it. And I think one of the biggest problems has been where politicians fire off insults at each other without thinking of the consequences to them or their families. And I think they need to really take a cold, hard look at themselves in the mirror when they do that. It's really totally unacceptable. Good afternoon, David. Great to see you back. This is Barry. Good afternoon. We miss you, Peter and Nick, at weekends. Politicians should have some sort of security matched with very severe consequences should they be harmed. I'm ex-military in Northern Ireland. I still check under my car every morning. I remember a former Defence Secretary who I knew. Every time we got in his car, he would use a mirror and look under his car for any devices that had been planted. I think it was Northern Ireland Secretary, actually. Lots of other messages. Keep all of those coming in, please. Let's take a call, though. Jackie's in Oldham. Good afternoon, Jackie.
Hello, David. Nice to see you back on our
Hello,
TV.
Jack. It's been a very long time. How are you?
I'm very well. I hope you're well, too.
I'm all right, thank you very much. Nice to be back with the Talk family.
Yes, it's nice to see you. Mr Burnham.
Yes.
Raising taxes. If he tries to raise taxes again, financially, we're going to fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
I mean, what a lot of people don't understand, and I've learned this from listening to various economists, and we have 3 trillion debt, but we also are committed to public sector pensions, which are unfunded, and other public sector liabilities, and it takes that debt to 11.7 trillion debt. Now, he cannot keep raising taxes for his vanity projects that he wants to do. We have a maximum on the Laffer curve of how much we can be taxed before tax receipts start to fall.
100%.
If you push it any higher. And we are at that point. We are at that point.
Well, I agree. You know, when you look at national debt in this country, it's above £3 trillion. £3 trillion. Labour is borrowing £4,000 a second, £369,000 every day. You've got a benefit bill of £333 billion. On top of that, the NHS, what, the start, £250 billion thereabouts, so you've got £500 billion there. And, you know, our national debt is 100% of GDP.
Yeah, and if they don't cut spending, we will end up again like we were in the 70s with the begging bowl to the IMF.
That's right.
We cannot go on like this. Politicians have got to get a grip and start cutting public spending, or else we're in serious trouble.
But you see, that is not a vote winner, is it? So Andy Burnham is not going to do that, is he?
But this comes back to some of the politicians that we have that don't always put what is best for the country and not best for the party.
Agreed.
First.
I totally agree. But how do you change that mindset? Because if you get in, as he has, you're going to try and cling on as long as possible. And, I mean, when you look at the policies he's announced, I mean, they're all pretty non-policies, if you ask me. But, again, uncosted. We've no idea how much money he's splurging or where that money's coming from. And, of course, we've got the budget then in October, and it's going to be an absolute horror.
Well, exactly. But I think the thing is that we need to go back to the system, because don't the parties choose the candidates? It used to go through the association.
It depends on the party, but yes, you're right. So the local association may be given a choice of 3 candidates, for example. They then do a hustings and that person is then elected. But each party is different.
Yeah. I think we need to try back, you know, using that system again, where people are tested. We've seen with the Labour Party that people were put into safe seats, etc. in the last election.
Yeah.
And, you know, you need to have conviction politicians to deal with the problems, so many problems that this country has got. And financially, we can't do anything unless we get our finances in order.
I totally agree. Really good to talk to you, Jackie. Don't be a stranger. I'm back for the next 2 weeks, so do call again. Lots of messages coming in as well. Hi, Dr. David. Great to hear you back on air. I almost couldn't believe it when you said it was over a year ago. That you swapped the Talk microphone for the Reform UK one. Talk is unique in being sympathetic to Reform UK, gives us supporters a decent voice, not by its editorial policy, but by the voice it gives to Joe Public, which would otherwise not be heard. Thank you, David and Talk. That's Nick from Who in Kent, the Rochester and Stroud branch. Very good to hear from you, Nick. Lots of other messages. We're keen to hear from people of all political persuasions, I must just add at that point. It's really important that we have grown-up conversations about all the issues that matter to all of us. Lots of other messages about public protection. This is Lorraine. The safety of all politicians is paramount, David, but it is very obvious that the establishment feel that reform are different. This starts with Westminster, where the absolute gutter politics, the heckling, the abuse of reform from opposing MPs in the House resembles something medieval, and Lindsay Hoyle has to take responsibility for such abhorrent behaviour by failing to deal with it and stop it. That's a brilliant point, and I agree entirely with that. If you see any Reform UK MP stand up, they are immediately booed, they aren't given the time of day, and I don't think that's OK. This is Stephen in London. David, excuse me, when I was in the civil service for 40 years, from the Blair era onwards, I witnessed clear and deliberate, deliberate spite and revenge, bitter anger and arrogance from many SPADs, which are special advisers and ministers on both sides, but especially an alarming amount from the left. It's really vengeful and intolerant. Excuse me. This has split into society, and what we now see has come this political period of the last 35 years. Keep all those messages coming in, please. Should politicians have more protection? Why on earth would anyone want to be an MP? It's a rhetorical question, actually, to myself. Also, what price should we put on democracy? And if you change your manifesto, should that trigger a general election? The number 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222 and message us on X at talkTV. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. Just after 2 o'clock, I'm David Bull, in for Ian Collins all week this week and next week as well, you lucky things. Thanks ever so much for your company. An hour already gone, 2 to go. Let's just look at the top headlines because police are probing a possible link between Anne Widdecombe's murder and an incendiary device pushed through Nigel Farage's letterbox. Figures show that 96% of MPs have faced abuse and over a quarter of them have faced death threats. So the question I'm asking this afternoon is, what price do you put on democracy? The number 0344 499 1000. Now, keeping with politics, Labour has overtaken Reform UK in the polls for the first time in 18 months. Labour has edged ahead 24% to 22%. That is the lowest score for Farage's party in over a year. And Britain has become the first country in Europe to approve a new weight loss pill dubbed a treatment for life with, wait for this, 20 million Brits potentially eligible. And those are the top headlines. Well, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Now, we're going to stick with politics this hour, something I know a little bit about. Labour has actually overtaken Reform UK in the polls for the first time in 18 months as some of the party's 2024 voters return to the fold. Now, this is a YouGov survey for The Times, and it found that Labour was backed by 24% of voters. That is 2 points ahead of Nigel Farage's party, which has dropped down to 22%. That is the lowest score since March of last year. You may remember that Reform UK was riding high on about 31% for some considerable time, and now it is fair to say Reform UK has been top of the polls for the last year or so. The rise, however, for support in Labour has come primarily at the expense of the Green Party. Now, they're down 1 point to 12%. The Lib Dems also down as well, 1 point to 11%. That's compared with August, the beginning of August, the 2nd and 3rd. Now, the Conservative Party, and I've put this on record, the Conservatives actually under Kemi Badenoch do seem to be stabilising and increasing as she broadens her offering. We're up 2 points on 21%, putting them just 1 point behind Reform. Now, there's a lot going on behind here. You've got changes in voting intention. You've got Labour voters coming back saying now Burnham's in charge. They would now back Labour. Now, when Keir Starmer stood down, 49% of the voters who gave him his landslide said they were still supporting the party. That then rose to 60% in the latest poll. So that is quite an increment. Now, at the same time, the number of voters, Labour voters, who said they would back the Greens has fallen as well from 19% to 18%. Well, to dissect and uncover some of that, or unpack some of that, is Fraser Myers, Deputy Editor of Spike. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, David. Thanks for having me.
Really good to see you after quite a long time, actually.
Yeah.
What's your take on this? I mean, you know, look, obviously I've been away, as you know. I've been closely involved with Reform. Reform was riding high in the polls, 31%. I mean, it was extraordinary when I was on my tour going around the country and just seeing it tick up. Now, there's no doubt Reform has fallen in the polls. That coincides sort of with Andy Burnham, who's sort of got a bounce, but it doesn't really explain everything that's going on. What's your reading of it?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's probably premature to call it a Burnham bounce. I think if we can call it anything, maybe it's a not Starmer bounce, because what you're really seeing beneath that, as you highlighted in your introduction, is not people switching from Reform UK to Labour, and not even those red wall seats that Labour used to, you know, comfortably hold, working class voters going back to the party that was founded to set up their interests. That's not what's happening. What's really happening is voters who are tempted by the Greens, by the Lib Dems, who may have backed Keir Starmer at the last election, are starting to warm to Burnham. They're starting to go back to him. So it's really Labour bringing back the sort of coalition that it had at the last election, rather than it winning back Reform supporters. They're not seeing Burnham as the answer to the problems that they want sorted out. And I think that's quite understandable, really. If you think about Burnham has made a lot of hay talking about the cost of living. He's got a new policy seemingly every day. I think time will tell whether those actually make a big difference to people's wallets and whether people will be that grateful for them, because they do seem like small fry. But what has he got to say about the issues that have turned people to reform? What has he got to say about immigration? What does he have to say about the mega-dinghy, which has highlighted Labour's atrocious unwillingness to control the border? So I think that, yeah, we're seeing, perhaps the electorate is consolidating again. We've had periods in recent history where, remember Labour and the Tories were getting 80% of the vote in 2019. In 2017, we saw, the Tories managed to consolidate the right-wing vote in 2019. The right sort of fell apart in 2024. And Reform haven't quite managed to unite the right yet. But, we shouldn't write them off. As you say, they've been at the top of the polls for over a year. It's absolutely extraordinary, a once-in-a-century occurrence where a brand new party has the chance to essentially oust an older party. So I wouldn't write Reform off yet. I wouldn't say we've reached peak Reform. And I would also caution those getting a bit excited about a Burnham bounce. I
mean, I think you're right in that. And also that Burnham's had a pretty clear field, hasn't he, since his ascendancy. So when you look at those policies, I mean, they're not exactly mind-blowing. They're small fry when you look at it, capping the bus fares at £2. I mean, this idea that he's going to make it easier to cancel subscriptions, stop the clock, I mean, suddenly my life is so much better. He's not addressing, as you rightly say, the issues that people, and I know because I've been out and about around this country for well over a year. People are sick and tired of the illegal immigration crisis that we're seeing in this country. They are sick and tired of seeing prisoners being released. There's no justice, it seems, in this country, a lack of fairness, people being taxed to the hilt. We are going to also see Burnham now having to make some very serious decisions. What is he going to do about the early release schemes, for example? What is he going to do about prison places? What is he going to do in the budget in October? And these are going to be very serious, and he can no longer ride high on these, these initiatives like Number 10 North, which I still don't understand the point of.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. When the rubber hits the road, that's when Burnham's going to face some real challenges. He's been blessed by having no opponents in the Labour Party, so there was no one on the left taking chunks out of him in what could have been quite an acrimonious contest to replace Keir Starmer, so he was lucky on that count. He's been lucky, I think, by the implosion of Zach Polansky and the Greens. I think ever since Zach Polansky appeared to side or, criticise the police officer who took out the terrorist at Golders Green, I think the public has started to get cooler on him. So he has been lucky on that front. And then when events occur, as you say, the first budget, when tax rises come, economists have suggested, there's a story in the Telegraph, that there may need to be £25 billion worth of tax rises. That, by the way, is also a big driver of the cost of living that he, studiously hasn't mentioned. There's the energy bills that are still going through the roof. He's made some good noises on drilling for North Sea oil, but I don't think he's going to go anywhere far enough to bring down bills. Still nominally committed to net zero, which is keeping electricity expensive. And events, what's going to happen? How will Burnham react to, say, a terror attack? Or how will he react? He says he's, doing everything he can to keep PC Harper's killers in jail, but he still hasn't come up with a solution to that. So I think he could very easily be blown over by events. Events can also be the making of new prime ministers, of course. That is also a possibility. But I think he has had a very lucky couple of weeks. He's had a longer honeymoon than Keir Starmer, and he may have a few more weeks, especially before Parliament returns and real questions start to be asked about what direction he's taken the country in.
I mean, you make a very good point about the budget in October. We're hearing, you mentioned this article in the Telegraph, he'll raise taxes by £25 billion to fund his spending pledges. Now, of course, we saw that, didn't we, before with the Chancellor before, with Rachel Reeves putting huge tax rises on. We believe the Prime Minister is going to target entrepreneurs and pensioners. Now, that's not going to go down very well. And also, we've already seen 11,000 non-doms leaving this country already. It seems to me that the government wants to tax people more and more. All that will happen is those that have the means to do so will leave the country. And that is very bad for UK PLC.
Yes, that would be bad news. And, we already have tax rates at the highest since the end of the Second World War. Taxing us even further is really not the direction to go in. We need to see some policies that are going to stimulate economic activity, not drag us further down. And many people think that, sometimes everyone is happy to pay in and contribute to things like the NHS or, decent public services. But a lot of people are wondering, well, where is this money going? They're not seeing improvements in public services from all the taxes they pay. A lot of people feel swindled by the fact that a lot of taxes are going on, things like asylum hotels, which don't feel like that's really part of the social contract to be paying for people who are here illegally. So I just don't think that there is going to be much public mood or much public appetite to be taxed even further. And so there are going to be some severe problems there down the line. I think even people who may be natural Labour voters are not going to be able to weather these large tax increases, frankly.
Well, I would agree with you. And also this £25 billion raid, as you say, would push the tax burden in this country to a record high of 39%. Now, one of the things that I do think is quite interesting is he has tackled, or at least attempted to say, social care is something he wants to sort out. Now, I admire him for that, because successive governments have not done that. And it is one of the biggest problems in this country. We have an increasingly ageing population. And part of the reason the NHS isn't functioning properly is because we've got people who shouldn't be in the acute sector. We've got nowhere to put them, and social care simply doesn't exist. Now, if he can somehow hypothecate a tax, say, social care levy, do you think that's a way to sell it to the electorate?
I think it could be a way to sell it to the electorate, but there will be opposition to it, and we can all remember the way that when the Conservatives proposed reforming social care, Theresa May's policy was instantly branded the dementia tax. Yeah. So even though I think there is everyone on the political spectrum agrees that this issue needs to be sorted out. As you say, it's one of the main reasons why you can't see a doctor or get a hospital bed in the NHS. It's also dragging down local councils. So much local authority funding is spent nowadays on providing social care because it's not hypothecated in that way. That's one of the reasons why there's potholes in your roads, why the streets are dirty, why you feel like the quality of life in this country in general is fading. So again, I think he would be applauded if he succeeds in reforming this issue. But political parties are opportunistic. People will find ways to tear this down, no matter what this policy proposes, because there will inevitably, with such a large amount of money being spent, I think 18 billion has been suggested as the cost of a possible national care service, there has to be losers in that, and that means spending cuts or tax rises.
Well, I mean, one of the things that he needs to grip and grasp very clearly is the welfare budget, £333 billion being spent on it, and we know what a thorny issue that is because the last government tried to deal with that, and of course there was a backbench revolt over that. When you also look at 6.6 million people in total claiming out-of-work benefits, the country cannot afford that.
Yeah, the country cannot afford it, but it's something that Labour MPs seem determined to block any reform on. It was, as you say, the backbench rebellion that prevented some pretty modest reforms, actually, from Keir Starmer from getting through. And, Andy Burnham was chosen really only by Labour MPs. I suspect there'll be other issues as well where Labour MPs will have to wag the tail of the dog. Migration is another one. Lots of Labour MPs do not like Shabana Mahmood's proposed reforms to indefinite leave to remain that would restrict welfare to new migrants. Andy Burnham has himself said publicly that people should be able to claim benefits from day one when they arrive, and I'm sure there's many Labour MPs who agree with that, even though that's clearly not going to be his policy. I don't think he's that's politically suicidal. But you can see where his instincts lie and where the instincts of Labour MPs lie. So, they could present lots of problems for him, even if they, clearly helped him out in getting rid of Keir Starmer, cleared the path for him to become leader. They could still yet cause a lot of trouble.
I mean, so it kind of is like, would the real Andy Burnham stand up? Now, there's an article in the Times today saying that actually Andy Burnham should call an election now, partly because the manifesto has changed, but also partly because the right-wing parties haven't got their acts together. So you've got Reform and Restore, for example, and this very public dispute that's going on between them. At the same time, the Conservatives, so there's a split 3 ways for that right-wing vote. I mean, do you think there's any indication that that he might well just go for a snap election?
It's hard to say. I mean, he has explicitly ruled it out, but that doesn't mean that
he's a politician.
Won't call one. Every prime minister who's called an early election in recent years has said they didn't want to call one. And yes, this Times article is good in laying out, where things could go. I mean, Burnham, in our fragmented politics, and as you say, with the right split three ways, he only needs to get 30% or so of the vote, which is, it would be extremely low. Let's not forget that Starmer got a very low percentage of the vote as well, on a very low turnout. He only needs the right to either be split or demoralised and not know who to vote for, to either, I think, win a slim majority, nothing like as much as Labour has now, or perhaps a governing coalition, because I think the Lib Dems and the Greens would definitely be open to that, probably more open to supporting a Burnham-led government than a Starmer-led one. And in general, I think that politicians or new prime ministers should call new elections if they want to change the direction of the country. Andy Burnham is not presenting himself as simply, continuity Starmer. He's saying that he wants to actually quite radically change the constitution, devolving power to the regions, changing how we do politics. That's all well and good, but why not put your ideas in a manifesto and put them to the public? See if that's what the public want. I suspect actually people don't really like their local councils and think it might be a bad idea to give the people who can't clean up their bins even more power. But that's just my take.
Really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. That's Fraser Myers, Deputy Editor of Spite. Lots of messages coming in. This is nice. David, it's good to see you back. Thank you very much. You're the most professional presenter on any channel. Well, that's very kind. Is it? My mum, this. We trust you more than Andy. You come over as honest. Thank you very much. This from Erois. The abuse and vitriolic attacks on reform by the establishment reflects their true feelings and attitudes towards the electorate. We really have entered a dark tunnel of dictatorship. I had that conversation with a very senior politician yesterday about how, regardless of the colour of the government, the powers that be, the civil service, continue to operate as they wish, almost ignoring the wishes of the democratically elected servants from the public. It was a really interesting conversation and quite enlightening and actually very tragic in the same way. Deborah, hello, David. Lovely seeing you again. It's always a real boost. That's very sweet. Thank you. Always there's a way to stop the boats, or should I say the water aeroplanes without wings, given the size of the dinghies now. Well said, the 737. We need a new government, plain and simple. Nigel showed that where there's a will, there's a way, talking about the prison situation. And one more, Boopy says, the UK public are good people, but their kindness is taken for weakness. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. I'm asking, what price do we put on democracy? How much should we pay to keep MPs safe? Why would anyone become an MP? Should you, if you change the manifesto, should that necessarily trigger a general election, as Fraser was just saying? Let me know your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Also, you can message us on X as well at talkTV. All voice notes, like voice notes as well. And you can WhatsApp us as well. I'll take your calls, thoughts and messages after this break.
We've been on the beaches for 2 days running. Both days we've been hassled by the local French police. They've turned up armed to the teeth, looking very aggressive. We've had to arm ourselves, actually, with gas masks. They're checking our ID, wanting to know what we're doing here. They should show as much enthusiasm, I think, with the migrants. They seem to be waving them through and hassling us. But this morning, they asked for my ID. I told them to clear off. I said, you got it yesterday. You're not hassling me on the beach on my morning stroll.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. 2:23, David Bull in for Ian Collins all week and next week, you lucky things. Thank you very much for all your messages. Tons coming in. Let's just do this one. Lawrence from Bolton says, David, I actually think cutting public spending is a vote winner. I would agree, actually. At least people can see that something is being done. But for Labour and their ilk, this is about ideology. And having to cut back on spending is an admission they're fundamentally wrong in their foundational beliefs of how to run the country. I mean, when you look at those numbers, our national debt has risen above £3 trillion pounds. Labour is borrowing £4,000 a second, £369,000 per day. You've got a benefit bill of £333 billion. You've got 6.6 million people on out-of-work benefits. You've got employer national insurance now at 15%, which is clobbering all the small businesses, which is why they're not employing anyone. You've got a national minimum wage, which is now £12.71, and, of course, 1.76 million people not in employment. Of course, 1 million kids not in employment, education or employment. And so, therefore, you have to look at that picture and then go, what is going right with the country? And I would argue not very much. Let's take a call. Matthew is in Warrington. Good afternoon.
Hiya, Dr. David. Great to speak to you, mate.
And you. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, I'm a member of Reform. I joined Reform a year ago. I live in Warrington. Warrington's half and half. It's half Tory, half Labour. Can go either way.
Yep.
The best MP we ever had here was Doug Boyle a long time ago. But what worries me about Reform is, yeah, we know where we're at with immigration, and totally agree. But it's everything else. I really want them to start talking about our education, what they're going to do about our military, what they're going to do about our health system, what they're going to do about our roads. And what worries me is there's not enough people to cover them roles at this moment in time. And if there was an election, it would stop people voting for us because we haven't got the right people in yet, and at grassroots as well. We had a Reform councillor. I wanted to help out and get involved a little bit going towards election. There's nothing, so at grassroots level, it's lacking on that side. It's all going on the top, but it needs to spread its wings out and start putting the hard miles in now and get more people on board. And do you know where I'm coming from?
I do, and actually, I think Fraser made a very good point, which is this is really once in a lifetime where you see a new party, an insurgent party, coming from where it was. I mean, obviously, I've been involved since the very beginning, and so to go to where Reform is with 8 members of Parliament, 450 branches and thousands of people, 268,000 members or whatever, is extraordinary. But you're right. So the way I liken this is you go from a start-up to an SME, like a small medium enterprise, but now the next step is to go to that multinational, and I think you're right. So you need to have spokespeople, which they have got on various issues. But again, there isn't anyone speaking, as you say, about social care or health or about education. So we don't, or Reform UK doesn't have that infrastructure currently. Now, they will argue that this is all going to be unveiled. There is talk there is going to be unveiling at conference. I don't know. I literally don't know. But do you think that is something that's putting off the voters?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I just think I'm out and about. I'm a delivery driver. I'm on tour quite a lot most weeks. A big listener of Talk. And I speak to guys on trucks, on forklifts, on road workers, and everyone says we need a change. Everyone's saying let's vote Reform. I've met one person who said, "Oh, I don't mind Andy Burnham." No one, the working man and woman, everyone is seeking that change. We have had enough. And the other thing is, I think we're sick of elections as well.
Yeah, I'd agree.
The turnouts in the recent elections, people are put off, and you know, the likes of me who's got quite politically active over the last couple of years after seeing how the Labour Party have treated us and after COVID and that, you start to find out what's going on. But most people, they come home, they have the tea, they put the news on, they get the propaganda from ITV and BBC and Sky, because it is propaganda. It is all one way, and they believe it, so they go, oh, they're all the same, these politicians. And I know that Nigel Farage's mum, I quite like him, to be honest with you. I like he wears he looks like he means what he says, and he wears his heart on his sleeve. I absolutely think Zia Yusuf is amazing. I love listening to what he's puts on Instagram, and he's. I would like to go into a verbal battle with him in the chambers of Parliament, because I just think he's so switched on. But we need something more now. We can't. Obviously, you've got the problem if too many people come over from defects from the Tories, then it's all you.
Do you think that's a problem? I heard this yesterday. Someone said to me there are just too many Tories now.
No, because let's be honest about it. Reform is what the Tory party used to be. That's why people. I voted Tory before Reform.
That's interesting.
Because you know, at the end of the day, the worst thing that happened to the Tory party is, well, it was a good thing at the time, because when they went to coalition with the Lib Dems, they got infiltrated and they soaked down, they banned down it. I think when Boris came in, Boris will be our new Winston Churchill saviour of and he was a wet lettuce when COVID killed Boris off. He absolutely done him.
Well, that's right, and he had a personal experience, didn't he? And that tempered how he then responded. And of course, then you got the Boris wave, the 3.8 million people that came here. But also, I think it's worth pointing out the Tory party is not one party. You've got 5 different parties competing. And what Kemi Badenoch is trying to do is to get rid of the wet Liberals, with some success, I say. But again, now you've got a position where the right is really, really split. And that's why I said Andy Burnham could make hay and go straight through the middle by calling an election now.
He'll lose a lot of seats, but I do think, at the end of the day, people voted the Tories out, not Labour in.
That's very true.
That's what it was.
It's true.
They voted, and now what happened is Middle England are now getting what likes of Warrington, Salford, Widnes, all these northern towns where we're getting immigrants coming in and there's nowhere to put them, and now they're going into the Cotswolds, they're going into Cambridgeshire, and those people go, oh my God, this is actually for real, we don't want these people here. And it's the wake-up call. Once Middle England's done, it's then going to start going into the real posh end of the country, because there's nowhere to put these people. And you normal, everyday, maybe a bit liberal person is going, actually, I'm in the park here and I don't like seeing all these young men hanging around the park, because that's what it's like.
Yeah.
I went on the park on Sunday with my 10-year-old daughter and my wife. We walked through and there was 2 men in the kids' bit. They didn't have any children with them. They were just sat there with arms folded, just sat in the park.
I mean, I've seen it myself.
That's scary.
I would agree.
There's loads of people about, but you just think, what? If you've not got kids, why would you as a 30, 40-year-old man, be sat in the park?
It's a very good point. I mean, I think you're right, Matthew. There is a wake-up call going on, and the political parties better listen to what is going on, and that goes across the board. Thank you very much for your call. Afternoon, David. This is Nick. Whilst Nigel is the best of a bad bunch, even if he does become Prime Minister, which I doubt, by the way, unfortunately, he won't get 1% of his policies through. Britain is doomed. Nothing will improve. Just steadily get worse. Now, I share that sentiment to a degree, but you have to have faith that something will change, that we can actually make this country better and restore it to its place as it once was, a proud, sovereign, independent nation. Lots of other messages coming in. We're not seeing any improvements because there are too many people in this country who are not paying their way. I agree. The problem we have, this is Kay, is the more people on benefits, the more they'll vote Labour, even if they don't like the illegals. The legal migrants from the Commonwealth had the vote too. I think it's wrong, in all honesty. No migrants should have the vote whatsoever. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. After the break, I'm going to be talking about some really exciting health news on weight loss pills and also on hepatitis C.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Keep all those messages coming in, please. So many coming in about everything we're talking about. What price do you put on democracy? Talking about the safety of members of parliament. I mean, I know I'm really close to it, but I have even been thinking, why would anyone become a member of parliament or indeed stand for political office across the board if you feel that your life is going to be threatened? And of course, you know, the whole horrific incident with Anne Widdecombe, which has been a terrible wake-up call, and on the back of David Amos and Joe Cox, and here we go again. I mean, things have got to change. Also, Andy Burnham and the change in his manifesto, should that trigger a general election? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Send us a WhatsApp voice note. You can, what else? Oh, yes, message us on X as well, at Talk TV. Right, I want to talk about some more health news now. A new weight loss pill has been approved in the UK. Now, this is really interesting. The UK has become the first... I'm not saying it's a great thing. I'm just saying this is the fact. It's become the first country in Europe to approve a weight loss pill that could become a treatment for life. This is Orforglipron, made by Eli Lilly. Its trade name is Foundeo. Now, this is Eli Lilly is the firm, if you remember, that's behind Mounjaro, which has helped people to lose around lots of weight. But this particular drug, which you take orally, i.e. by mouth, helps people to lose about 12% of their body weight. Now, the fact that the MRHA, the Medicines Health Regulatory Authority, has approved this as the first country in Europe is quite significant. I won't explain why it's so significant. I'm going to introduce Basha Mukherjee, who is an NHS GP. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Bill. How are you?
Really good to see you. I'm good, thank you very much indeed. So here we go again. We know that obesity is a huge problem in not just this country, but in Western countries generally. I've been following this story for a long time with semaglutide, with Wegovy, with Ozempic, and now we have another one. Why do we need another one?
See, this is interesting because I think Eli Lilly, obviously like any other drug company, they were behind Mounjaro.
Yeah.
And with Mounjaro, we know that because of the safety regulations, we really shouldn't be issuing them for more than 2 years at a time. And we know that one of the side effects after coming off Mounjaro is that the weight does come back. Slowly, yeah. It does come back. Now, that's a problem, and they've created a solution to that problem, which was, you know, this medication can be now used as a follow-up medication when you come off Mounjaro, so you maintain that body fat loss essentially. So yeah, I mean, I'm very skeptical about this medication. Also, I think it's actually going to perpetuate more of those health inequalities because it's going to be a while before it's available on the NHS. And sadly, you know, the lower socioeconomic group members who cannot afford this medication are going to be the ones that are going to be suffering as a result.
And this particular drug is also interesting, isn't it? Because it's a tablet, but you can take it any time of the day, and that makes it different from the others.
Yeah, so there's lots of positives to a medication like this because we had an alternative to Mounjaro, which was Wegovy, and Wegovy had lots of very specific, it was very specific as how you needed to take it. You had to take it on an empty stomach and all the rest of it. People often had a lot of side effects to it as well. Now, that's not to say that this medication does not have it. Nausea and gut side effects seems to be at the top of the list. Now, bear in mind that this medication's only just been launched, so we're yet to find out some of the longer term side effects, as we have done for Mounjaro as well. More data has shown more side effects and dangerous things on the side. So, you know, as exciting as this is as an alternative option, I also think that people should be very mindful about what we don't know.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Of course, it's available to buy privately, so that can be done. But as you say, it's not available on the NHS. Are you worried, though, as a GP, that essentially, you know, this is something we talked to a great deal about in med school, which was the medicalisation of really what it should be a normal condition. So you've got people who are way overweight, even obese, so clinically obese, where your BMI is 30 to 40, which is weight over height squared. Basically, you're saying, I'm no longer going to actually deal with my own issue, but I'm just going to pop a tablet or an injection. Are you concerned by that, sort of the lack of, I don't want to say lack of self-control, but the fact that people are increasingly reliant on medication?
So I'm going to say that, you know, when I was young and...
You are.
Skinny myself, let's just say, a size 6, should I say. I was in the pageant industry. I really used to think that we have full control over exactly what we eat and exactly how we lead our lives. But actually, it's taken a lot of sort of self-reflection and realizing that we live in a world that does not allow for maintaining good health majority of the time, yourself included. You're sitting down. A lot of our jobs are sedentary at the moment. As a GP, I have to take out extra time to get my steps in, otherwise I just won't. And look at the food that's around us as well. There's so many things working against us. You know, to cook food, you need time. To store food, healthy food, you need all these resources. And I'm just more compassionate now towards people's lives and the reality of it. And actually an easy fix for them is like, it's a quick dopamine rush to get something sweet. And this is why we see so many NHS staff who are so burdened with work. They are constantly snacking on sweets and things like that. Now, in an environment like this, of course, we would love for it not to be like this, but that's not the reality. And this is where the drug companies can come in and take advantage, really, by offering what seems like a quick solution.
Well, I think you're right. And also, I have enormous sympathy with people who have very busy lives, 2 or 3 jobs, and then children, and trying to come home and cook for them and then deal with that and taking them to after-school clubs and then getting up again and repeating. So there is no time for yourself or for exercise. Now, Eli Lilly, and you made a great point there, this is very clever for them, which is not only do they capture the market early on, they continue the market. And if you've got 20 million people potentially on these drugs, that is a lot of money, which pays back your R&D costs enormously, your research and development costs.
Absolutely. And, you know, they've priced them, you know, even with Mounjaro, it was such an expensive drug, which is why it took such a long time to actually be factored into NHS services as well. And we're still seeing, I mean, the guidelines have changed over and over again about accessibility to Mounjaro. We've had patients come in after seeing the news. They've said, oh, you know, now I can access it on the NHS. And time again, I've had to break that bad news to them that actually this particular area, we haven't got any funding for it. Yeah. So, you know, I really feel for the patients who actually might be looking at this as a good news, but actually when they go to access it, they're going to face more barriers. And we know that for people who are suffering with obesity, you know, if they take that brave, courageous step to actually address it, to go see their GP, the last thing they need is more barriers and for sure not false hope. You know, it's so difficult to have that conversation about exercise and diet, etc., when they've got in mind that they've got that solution, they've got that, oh my God, that magic pill that I want essentially. I find that a very different conversation with patients who've come in for Mounjaro or come in for a weight loss pill, but to initiate a conversation on diet and exercise really different.
I mean, I agree, and you know, as long as I've been doing these stories, also the role of the supermarket and the cheaper foods, and they're packed full of processed ingredients, and of course it's very difficult if you're in a hurry as a consumer to unpack the ingredients. I mean, you know, even as a medic reading some of the ingredients, you might as well be reading something in Swahili.
Absolutely. And you know, for people's busy lives, it is, I don't even want to say that people don't know. I think they know, but they are in such a, you know, a lot of people that I speak to, they genuinely, they can't access the good foods as well. You know, they need to be able to have adequate storage, and time seems to be a big one. Money seems to be the big one. It shocks me that some of the processed food out there is so much cheaper than essentially what we're growing out of the ground. It absolutely shocks me.
I would agree totally. Let's move on and talk about hepatitis C. This is an amazing story. Hepatitis C is on track to be eliminated in England, health officials have said. Since 2015, more than 100,000 people have been diagnosed and treated for the virus, which attacks the liver and is spread through contact with infected blood. Now, the WHO, the World Health Organization, set a target in 2016 that 80% of all known cases should be treated by 2030. And England, I mean, it's amazing to hear that this country has managed it.
I love it when we actually have some good news about British healthcare, because so many years of being in the health profession, all that we've heard, except for COVID, maybe during COVID, we had some level of positivity surround healthcare. But actually, it's so nice to hear that we're actually on track and we're meeting some sort of a deadline, because we know what's been happening with the waiting lists across the board and all the bad news surrounding how the NHS has been operating. This actually goes to show just how hard different departments, trusts across the country have worked to establish this, really.
I totally agree, and you can see Scotland's not far behind, neither is Wales either. Also, I mean, it just reminds me of all the work that the clinics have been doing with HIV, for example, with sexually transmitted diseases. Again, stunning results led by clinicians, and then best practice, which has been rolled out around the country. And that's when actually the NHS does work brilliantly.
Absolutely. And, you know, prevention is and used to be one of the best things about this country. I do think that, you know, the work that goes on in the community, I'm a GP, so I'm very, very protective about the role of primary care and the role of, you know, these community hubs that are going into and targeting IV drug users, for example, and the amount of work it does is required to keep on top of and monitoring these patients, because it's so easy to lose track of them as well. The homelessness crisis has been going up over the years. So, you know, with all of the things that working against them to achieve this is actually such great work. I have to say, big congratulations to all the hubs that have done this.
And I will second that. So thank you very much. Really good to see you. That's Dr. Basha Mukherjee, who's an NHS GP. Right, we'll take a break. After the break, I'm going to take lots of your messages as well. We're talking about politics as well. Of course, Reform UK falling in the polls. Labour stealing a march on Reform. For the first time, actually, Reform was leading those polls for a good year and a bit. Also, John in Kent says, don't forget this poll has been taken after a massive anti-reform campaign by the establishment, which is ongoing with the unnecessary delayed investigation into this £5 million gift. That's interesting. He goes on to say it's a complete damn squib. Now, this £5 million gift from Christopher Harborne, certainly I don't know how interested the public are in that story. It is something the establishment is interested in. The press are certainly interested in that. And don't forget, it is the by-election in Clacton this Thursday. So I'll be here on Friday to unpick those results as well. That will be very interesting indeed. Keep all those messages coming in. So I'm keen to hear from you on a number of topics. Do you think politicians should have more protection? And if so, what price do you put on democracy? The number 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well, at talkTV. Send us a WhatsApp, send us a voice note, send a carrier pigeon, however you want to get in touch. And I'll be back after this short break.
not-so-small boat crisis. And there's a picture of the boat, and they've got a little wording in a little circle that says picture continued on the back, and they've actually put it's so big they've put it across the front page and the back page of the newspaper. I mean, this is absolutely huge.
It is. By definition it is. It's and they're getting bigger all the time.
Getting bigger. What's
I'm not really sure that you can call it a small boats crisis anymore.
It's a 49-foot dinghy.
We've been on the beaches for 2 days running. Both days we've been hassled by the local French police. They've turned up armed to the teeth, looking very aggressive. We've had to arm ourselves, actually, with gas masks. They're checking our ID, wanting to know what we're doing here. They should show as much enthusiasm, I think, with the migrants. They seem to be waving them through and hassling us. But this morning, they asked for my ID. I told them to clear off. I said, you got it yesterday. You're not hassling me on the beach on my morning stroll.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Talking about fat jabs, and I'm trying to eat a sandwich. Hi, David. Sean in Norway. Great show. What I object to in regard to fat pills and injections is so many people in the UK are eligible. Great point. Our obesity rates are a national embarrassment and a massive strain on the NHS. People here in Norway are in much better shape. That's interesting. I'm often taken that people in sunnier places like Spain, Portugal, for example, often are slimmer, but then you would be because the weather's better, and when the weather's terrible then we tend to eat more, but then in Norway that goes against my train of thought. But anyway, David, Jackie Garside says we cannot afford not to pay for protection for politicians. Threats, intimidation or violence threaten the very fabric of our political system and democracy. Very good point. Is 100 million too much to spend though? Protecting politicians? I don't know. Ben in Stockwell, he has a very strong point of view. The majority of sane British people will never vote for a racist political party like Reform. Ben, would you like to give me some evidence of it being racist? I'm just interested, because I think you'll find you're wrong. Alan in Staffordshire saying, looking at this mega boat, this is good. Now, if you look at this mega boat, so what was it, 230 on that mega boat, and it makes me think there is a lot more to this. Now, if each person weighs 50 kilos, you'll be lucky, but just under 8 stone, then the weight of the people alone is 11,500 kilos. Now, then include the weight of the boat and engine, then we're at 15 tonnes. So to control that weight with an outboard motor is a job for someone who is highly trained, and that's without the navigation. I think you're right, but at the same point, we know these people are highly trained, and that's the reason the boats are getting bigger, because they cannot make that business model work with smaller boats, which is why they're going to these bigger boats, which is why they're picking people up along the coast. Very good piece of maths, though. Thank you, Alan, in Staffordshire. For that. Hi, David, come from the lakes here. What I want to know is, the French are not playing ball at all. Who would let a migrant dinghy that big enter the water, not considering it a danger to human life? The French attitude is disgusting. We need to stop paying them my money. Again, let's not forget, this is a YouGov poll. This is what I was talking about, the Reform falling down in that YouGov poll. That's true. Not an independent pollster. I don't believe it. Victor Maldrew, I don't believe it. Keep all those messages coming in. Let's take a call now. Jill is on the line from Cornwall. Good afternoon.
Hello, David. You're talking about these injections for, fat people, basically.
Yes, I was.
I mean, when I was at school and as I grew up, I was encouraged to eat healthily to keep my weight down. I mean, these injections basically say, you know, eat what you want, get as fat as you want, have an injection, shake it off that way, and start again. I just don't see that this is a good idea to sort of solve the overweight situation.
I get that. So the counter-argument is that obesity causes such problems to the NHS and the huge financial burden on the NHS that it's better if people are overweight or clinically obese, which means your body mass index is between 30 and 40, you are more likely then to have problems like ischemic heart disease and varicose veins, diabetes, osteoarthritis and so on. The cost is so significant that the NHS cannot afford not to give people these drugs, given they are now freely available.
Well, there was a time, wasn't there, where people were taught what to eat.
I agree.
They were taught the advantage of certain foods, what their calories were, how many calories they should have a day. They don't seem to bother with that anymore. It just seems to be eat what you want, get as fat as you want, and someone will give you a jab to deal with it.
I mean, I think that's a very fair point of view. I mean, I think there's a lot in that. One is that I think we are working harder than ever. I think there's never any switch off. So, for example, emails, messages coming in the whole time, very little time to eat, going to buy convenience foods because you have little time. Does that somehow explain how we've got in this situation?
No, well, it does and it doesn't. I mean, people don't cook anymore.
They don't, that's true.
Whether they buy more convenience foods because they have to work harder, I don't know, or whether it's just easier to feed the family with convenient foods rather than trying to. You don't have cookery lessons at school. So many things have fallen off the sort of line of growing up and growing older. That you can see why we have the problems that we have. And it means not just going back to one thing, it means going back to quite a few things in order to sort of get it back on track. And to be perfectly honest, people don't want to be bothered with... no, they don't want to be bothered with sort of counting the calories and keeping fit and what have you. If it's easy to have a jab and get rid of it, that's what they do.
I mean, I have to say, I think the demands on people are now so significant, but equally you're right. I don't know how widespread cooking is taught. I enjoyed it when I was taught at school. But also, I mean, I was thinking the other day about I had a vegetable garden and I enjoyed growing vegetables. Now, the number of people with access to gardens, I would imagine, is quite relatively small. In the country, obviously, far more than that. But now, of course, farmers are being paid not to grow crops, but to have rewilding or solar panels and all the rest of it. So I think you're right. And also, we need to have food security in this country, don't we? Because we're living in very unstable times.
Yes, you're perfectly right. My concern is with everything that once it becomes incredibly easy to just do something, so many people won't take an option other than to just do the easy thing. And that means, you know, don't teach the kids what to eat or why to eat or anything else. Just wait until they get really fat and walk them along to the hospital. It's just, I find it incredibly, not depressing, but I find it very disheartening to think that we now have a situation where so many things have slipped away because one thing, it's easier. And to be perfectly honest, in the long run, it's not easier. You know, it will come back and bite us.
Well, I agree with that. And, you know, just going back to my point I made earlier, nearly half of all cancer cases are thought to relate to obesity. The cost of obesity, well over £100 billion, 19 billion alone to the NHS. But you're right, this has to be a number of prongs to this. Education, cooking, making sure that children are taught. I mentioned this story some months, it must be a long time ago now, but I was in a supermarket in East London and children were amazed that chickens actually don't come wrapped in plastic.
Well, I know, and I'm just amazed that some children don't realise where eggs come from.
No.
You know, and they don't know what a parsnip is. You know, it is just, well, it could be quite depressing to think on these lines that you have just young people that think that beef is like a hamburger and they're looking in the field for the cows that look like hamburgers. I just find it all a bit depressing, but there you go.
I do agree. Jill, really good to talk to you. That's Jill in Cornwall. Lots of other messages coming in. We're talking about MPs. David, when I worked for a district council, we often had a visit by the local MP who was also a minister. I asked the facilities manager if his name board for his parking space outside my window could have a fictional name. That's Don in Chelmsford, talking about anonymity and, of course, the protection for MPs when they're carrying out surgeries or, indeed, when they're going to schools or whatever they're doing. This is Boopy. We've been deceived for years. Our children have been shaped by politicians. No wonder we have problems. This is going to take generations to sort out. Let's just take a voice note now. This is Hev in Kent, who wants to talk about Burnham, Labour and immigration.
Can you tell me, I don't know, but if we go crawling to the IMF again and they say, right, no more, so then I'm presuming we would then be bankrupt. Would that force a general election? Because I think quite possibly, if so, that's the way to go, because we're pretty much there now. So I can't see any other way out of this other than the King of the North calling a general, and I can't see him calling a general election. This whole situation worries the hell out of me. I cannot for the life of me understand why we ever let these people roam our streets, why we ever put them up in hotels and just let them roam our streets. They are the cause of so much of our problems. Law, money, finances, the crime is unbelievable.
Oh, wow. A lot to respond to there. Of course, it's not all of them. That's the first point I would make. But a lot of very, very strong opinions there. And the answer, I'm no economist, but my understanding is the gilt yields are now at record highs. So you're right in terms of our national debt, 100% of GDP. Could it devalue the currency? Yes. Could we go to the IMF? Yes. And my understanding is, would that trigger a general election? Then the answer, I believe, is yes, because there would be no confidence in the governing party. Lots more still to come. This is Talk. Do not go anywhere.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good good afternoon to you. Just after 3 o'clock, David Bull in for Ian Collins. Not just today, not just this week, but next week as well, you lucky things. Thanks ever so much for your company. 2 hours in, 1 hour to go. Lots of discussion points. Let's just go through the top news, though. Police are probing a possible link between Anne Widdecombe's murder and an incendiary device pushed through Nigel Farage's letterbox. Figures show that 96% of MPs have faced abuse and over a quarter of MPs have faced death threats. So the question I'm asking this afternoon is, what price do you put on democracy? We spend about £4 to £6 million on protecting MPs, with another 31 million on the back of that. Reform UK is calling for 100 million to be spent protecting our elected politicians. Labour has overtaken Reform in the polls for the first time in 18 months, edging ahead at 24%. They're now on to Reform's 22%. That is Farage's lowest score in over a year. And Britain has become the first country in Europe to approve a new weight loss pill dubbed a treatment for life, with 20 million Britons potentially eligible. We were just talking about that story. Those are the big stories making the headlines this hour. A very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much indeed for your company. Lots of messages coming in. I'm asking about politicians generally. Should they have more protection and at what cost? Also, would you advise a member of your family to go into politics? And I say that with a vested interest in that particular question. And what price do you put on democracy? Are you willing to use your taxpayer money to spend £100 million to protect politicians? And this comes on the back of Joe Cox, David Amis, and, of course, my former colleague, Anne Widdecombe. What price do you put on democracy? And with Andy Burnham as well tacking enormously left, he's got a budget coming up in October. They're talking about huge sums of money needing to be raised, 25 billion thereabouts. Should there be a general election? Should it automatically trigger a general election? Your thoughts, please. 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well, at talkTV. You can send a WhatsApp. You can send a voice note as well. Now, I have spoken a lot about net zero. We emit 1% of global emissions, and of course we know Mad Ed Miliband has been absolutely obsessed with net zero, and we know that electricity in this country is incredibly expensive. Now, what you may not know is that we are paying to turn off wind farms. £1 billion and rising. That is the cost of paying wind farms to switch off this year alone, hitting that mark faster than ever before. It could actually reach, according to forecasts, something like £8 billion by 2030. So this is the cost to consumers to switch off these wind farms when the grid simply cannot cope. And the grid just doesn't have the capability to join up all of these wind farms in the north, say in Scotland, or indeed the ones that are being built in East Anglia. They don't have the infrastructure to do that. Now, this cost seems to come from two places. One is that you have to then fire up gas-fired power plants to fill that surplus gas, and then also you have to pay those providers not to generate that electricity. It's complicated, but it's also about the lack of infrastructure in this country. And it seems to me very odd and anathema that when you are increasingly reliant on electricity, as we all are with computers and artificial intelligence, that things haven't been moving faster. But here's a man who knows far more than me. Jack Pardo is Head of Policy at Octopus Energy. Good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, David. Thank you for having me on.
Brilliant to talk. Brilliant to talk to you. Look, I'm a fan of an energy mix. I want nuclear, I want wind farms, I want solar, I want fracking, I want to see oil and gas used. Now, it seems to me that Ed Miliband was absolutely so obsessed with the energy, such as wind farms and so on, that we're now paying all of this money, over £1 billion. I was talking about it could reach 8 billion by 2030. Could you explain to people why on earth we're paying money to stop producing electricity?
Sure. So this is a problem that's been years in the making, goes back over multiple governments. What happens every half hour is the grid operator needs to keep electricity in perfect balance between demand and supply. And it lines up every generator, wind farm, nuclear plants, gas power plants, etc., from left to right, cheapest to most expensive. And then the cheapest turn on first, and then it sort of cuts the ribbon when you have enough electricity. What we're finding is that wind farms and solar, because they're fuel is free, sort of say we're going to turn on first. And then, exactly as you were saying, we're finding out that we haven't got the infrastructure to get the power from A to B. So we turn those renewables off, and then we pay a gas plant somewhere, usually down south, extra to fire up in a kind of like almost like a fake emergency. It's like we're having a fire every half hour and forgetting that we're having a fire every half hour. And if, like as you said, we've got a lack of infrastructure, but we've also got a lack of signals. So we could, instead of relying on really expensive grid upgrades, we could just be using that abundant power when it's there to cut bills. But we don't do that. We charge people in Scotland, for example, London-based gas prices instead of letting them have cheaper electricity so that they can turn up their demand more.
So this is regional pricing. So you are suggesting that actually, say for example, that example of Scotland, that somehow people in Scotland would have cheaper electricity simply because there are wind turbines nearer them. Why would that be fair?
So, I mean, lots and lots of countries do this. America, the Scandinavian countries, Japan, Australia, Singapore. It's not about wind power, necessarily local wind power. It's about whatever local supply of electricity you have. You could have a coal plant next door and you'd get cheaper electricity. The thing is about the system operator being able to see what the reality of supply and demand in electricity is across the country. And it's really important, not just for cutting bills and cutting waste across the system and giving everyone a bill cut. It's also important for operating the grid more effectively. I'm sure you'll have seen the stuff all about the 23rd of June, when the system operator had a bit of a tougher time than it would have liked in operating the grid. That would be helped with locational signals in the market.
OK, so just in terms of that, is this a short-term problem? Because clearly, I know in my neck of the woods in East Anglia, they're going to put in huge electricity pylons, which has caused the wrath of many local people, which are campaigning against what is going on. But are we saying that this is an interim problem? Until the cabling is in place, until we have the upgrades to the infrastructure, we will be constantly struggling with these problems. But once that is done, then problems solved.
Maybe that's what a lot of people will want you to sort of go along with, but you've got to remember that the people turning off the wind farms and also often turning up the gas plants and getting paid extra to do that are also building the network sometimes, and so they want to build as many power lines as possible. Power lines are really, really expensive, and they're only getting more and more expensive. What we're suggesting instead is that we should allow electricity bills to be cut rather than charging everyone the highest possible price everywhere all of the time, to basically change the shape of demand across the country.
I mean, it's quite interesting. Greg Jackson, who's the founder of Octopus, said the way Britain's electricity system is run is bonkers, which made me laugh out loud when I read it earlier on. Certainly, when you look at the way other countries work, so say, for example, you're in Spain and you have solar panels, you are allowed to use your solar panel electricity first before you then take from the grid. And indeed, you may, if you are then exporting to the grid, you then get paid for that exportation. But in this country, it doesn't work like that, does it? Because you then have to feed the whole lot back to the grid, for which you get a payment. Is that correct?
I think if you're talking about feed-in tariffs, you do still get to, if you've got rooftop solar, you do still get to use your electricity first, and it will be very, very cheap. You get to avoid all of the green taxes that the government puts on electricity from the grid for a start. So yeah, I'd definitely recommend to anyone get some rooftop solar if you can. So
just in terms of where we go from here, are we way behind other countries, or are we pretty much in the sort of average position with other countries when it comes to a lack of infrastructure, no investment, no forward planning? This is probably due to actually not having coherent thought between different governments.
It depends on, there's lots and lots of issues going on in our electricity grid, especially at the moment. It depends what kind of thing you're measuring in terms of if we're ahead of others or behind. In terms of how we run our electricity system, we are very, very far behind. We're still using rules that are 20, 30 years out of date. We should, like the majority of developed economies, be going ahead with locational pricing. Like I said, America does it, the Scandinavian countries do it, Singapore does it, Japan does it, Australia does it. It really is, no one's ever come back from doing it. It just does, it cuts bills everywhere across the country.
And so when you put that proposition forward, what's the response from government?
So the government took it off the table last year. They said we're going to try and evolve our market design anyway. They didn't want to put off investment in wind farms. At Octopus, we argued if you keep going the way we are and not dealing with these really high costs that are coming out of waste, then eventually the investment case collapses anyway, because people will get so peeved off with really high bills that there'll be a very justified backlash. So what we're saying is do the reform now, build less grids. You have to upgrade the grid less, cut people's bills directly, allow the value that renewable energy can make to come through to bill payers, rather than letting it get all gobbled up by the people who own the wind
So
farms.
that's a really interesting point. So if people see cheaper electricity bills, they'll be more on side with the move to net zero.
100%. We have a tariff called Fan Club, if you excuse the pun. We build a wind farm close by, and our customers get between 20 and 50% off when the wind is going. And we've had tens of thousands of people write to us asking for a wind farm nearby. It's much better than building massive wind farms in the wrong places without any kind of benefits going to local people, because that is just a perfect way to annoy people.
And so why wouldn't government be in agreement with that? If people do want to move towards this greener environment where you are trying to reduce your carbon footprint, why wouldn't you then adopt that as a government? That seems sensible.
I agree, yeah. Like I said, last year the government rejected it because they said we need to build a load of wind farms really, really quickly to reduce our dependency on imported gas. I get that argument, I really do. But like I said, the system operator recommended this, Citizens Advice recommended this, the Resolution Foundation, Energy Systems Catapult, Ofgem's old CEO, all of the official advice was going in one direction, which is to do this reform.
Right.
The government's trying to sort of tweak things around the edges and kind of bring in the benefits of locational pricing through the back door. We don't think it's going to work. A lot of the plans have already been delayed. We're sort of arguing that it's really time to get back to the one proven solution there is, which is bringing in locational pricing.
Now, let's move on and talk about this solar eclipse, which is Finn, my producer, very excited about the solar eclipse. He's got his little technology out there ready to go for tomorrow to see the solar eclipse. So this is going to take place between the 6 and 8 tomorrow night. You're asking people, and I believe you have 8 million customers, to cut back on electricity usage. Could you explain that?
Sure. So as I said earlier, you have to keep electricity in constant balance all of the time. So when the sun disappears behind the moon, we're going to have a drop-off in solar generation, about a gigawatt. We can do two things from there. We can either pay a bunch of gas plants, which at the moment with everything going on in Iran and Ukraine, gas is quite expensive. We can either pay them to turn up, or we can pay customers to shift their electricity demand. So we're going to ask customers who are up for doing this to sign up to our Eclipse Power Down, and then they use less electricity, which they're probably going to be doing anyway because they'll be outside looking at the eclipse, and then we'll give them a free hour of electricity the following day.
Very good. Carrot and stick. Excellent. Jack, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Jack Pardo there, Head of Policy at Octopus Energy. I think that's a really interesting point, though. If people could see the benefit of renewable energy and your electricity bills actually come down, you could say, oh, look, it actually is worth doing. But at the moment, it seems to be a bottomless pit that you just shove money in and the bills keep going sky high. I was talking to Vanessa, my marvellous makeup artist, earlier, and she was saying for a one-bedroom flat, her electricity is well over £100. I don't understand why it's quite so high. But again, as I say, the cost of electricity in this country is high. Even other countries like Spain, it is high, even though they have a lot of solar power. And we spoke about this yesterday. They then went into a period where they couldn't actually generate enough electricity as well because of their over-reliance on one particular form, which was obviously solar power. So that is why I'm in favour of an energy mix. Loads of messages coming in. David. This is Tracy in Staffordshire. If they're saying it's cheaper to treat people for obesity with drugs than pay for the medical treatment for the problems with obesity, by the same logic, why not just give thieves whatever they want, as it's cheaper than keeping them in prison? Very good. This is Sean. In Norway, I mentioned this earlier about the levels of obesity in Norway. Thank you for that. Lots of other people talking about the way politicians are treated. Becca says, Welcome back, David. What really annoys me with MPs or people close to political parties is they spit venom and then they cry victim when they get it back. I hate to agree with you, but actually I think some of the discourse on social media is absolutely atrocious and needs to stop. David, I don't think another general election works because there are too many games to play. Alternatively, each manifesto could declare the 5 key pledges as smart objectives in order. At each anniversary of the general election, the relevant smart objective would be tested, and for each failed 10% of the government's MPs would then give up their seats to the second-place party, crikey, in the affected constituency. Do this in order of the most marginal constituency first. John in Perth, you've really thought that through. Lots of other messages coming in. Michael in Norfolk. David, I believe an effective way to reduce the number of immigrants crossing the Channel is to give the French government fair notice. Unless you stop the boats, we are going to cancel your fishing rights in UK waters. I don't know whether you can do that under international treaties, but it's very intriguing indeed. David, I think Burnham... Oh, we were talking about general election, whether, according to that article, whether Burnham actually now might be the optimum time for him to go to the general election. And here, this one says, Keith in Forest in Scotland says, I think Burnham will gamble on a general election before the budget. If he wins, he then has 5 years to keep borrowing, spending and taxing. And I agree with you. I think, actually, he may well go for that gamble. Everyone else is telling me I'm wrong. We shall see. Right, after the break, your calls, thoughts and messages. This is Talk.
Not so small boat crisis. And there's a picture of the boat, and they've got a little wording in a little circle that says picture continued on the back, and they've actually put it, it's so big they've put it across the front page and the back page of the newspaper. I mean, this is absolutely huge.
It is. By definition it is. And they're getting bigger all the time.
They're getting bigger. What's
not really sure that you can call it a small boats crisis anymore.
It's a 49-foot dinghy.
We've been on the beaches for...
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. Just before the break, I was talking to Jack Pardo, Head of Policy at Octopus Energy. We're talking about the solar eclipse tomorrow, that they are basically going to give you some free electricity if you don't use your electricity during that eclipse. Finn, very excited about the eclipse. Tomorrow he's going to be outside for 2 hours looking at that. He's very angry with me for saying that. Frank Devlin, now, rooftop solar is, for my house, is going to cost me £16,000. It will take me 20 years to even break even. That is part of the problem. It's the capital cost up front. And then, by the way, and that gets me onto my pet subject of heat pumps again, I see all these adverts for heat pumps, but again, heat pumps, I think, will only work in a really well-insulated house, and many of the rural houses, and particularly where I live, are drafty old things. Great to see you back, Dr. David. It's simple. Yes, you should be forced to have a general election. In fact, I would go further and put a mechanism. The public should be able to demand one. And also, if there is a national emergency like a war or pandemic, that could be an exception. Thank you for that. Chris has a contrary view. No, changing a manifesto should not trigger a general election. Politics needs to be dynamic and adaptable to the issues of the day. A lot can happen between elections, and what might be right year one may not be right in year 3. Kaz in Bedford, good afternoon to you. Kaz says, David, like you, I am livid at the King of the North acceding to his throne without an election or mandate, and believe that reform is our only hope to fix our broken country. But, brackets, as an insider of Reform UK, brackets, please can you reassure us that they're fully ready for a general election at a moment's notice? Well, I have no official role with Reform UK. I was the chairman, I was the deputy leader. I have no official role. I'm sure all parties are gearing up for an imminent general election. I'll leave it there. Lots of others. Natasha says, hi, Dr. David, how fantastic to hear your dulcet tones, but I'm going to have to slightly disagree with you. You said that everyone who goes into politics, be it left or right, wants to make the country better. I did. Many in the left, David, hate our history and culture and despise it. They want to change it, but it won't be for the better. OK, fair comment, fair comment. Let's take a call. John is in Rotherham. Good afternoon, John.
Hi, David. How are you?
Yeah, all right, thanks very much. And you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to talk about the small boats. Which
yes.
Everybody's talking about the small boats at the minute. Just listening to, obviously, Andy Burnham and the Labour ministers that have been on the news rounds this last couple of days, and they're all talking about a reduction in crossings of sort of 45 to 50% compared to last year.
Yeah.
As if that's some kind of, success story. Well, if you actually look at the figures from the Home Office themselves, yeah, that's correct. Small boat crossings have gone down by, 45% compared to last year. Having said that, last year was a horrendously high year, and that was a year of a Labour government. But what they're not talking about is the number of people per boat has gone up by 45%.
That is right.
So from 2023, the average number of people in a boat was 46. It's now 67. So the smuggling gangs, all they're doing is they're changing tack. They're one step in front of the government, and they're now using much larger crafts to get a lot more people over in one go. They're launching them from different parts of the coastline, and just carrying on as we are is not going to solve this problem. And what Andy Burnham needs to do, and he'd get a lot of respect from voters maybe like myself who have always voted Tory and are now going to vote Reform, because nobody's sorting this problem out. And if he came out as a new PM and said, right, guys, I appreciate there's a massive, massive concern in the country about this. I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to do whatever it's needed, whether it's sending the Navy out, whether it's putting sanctions on other countries, whether it's building processing centres. I don't care. I'm going to stop it. And he hasn't done. And all he's doing is he's talking an absolute load of rubbish like the guy before him.
And do you think that, Reform has gone back onto its home territory of immigration? You've seen that with the launch of Operation Fortress, for example. Yeah. Nigel Farage and Zia Youssef said this is, we need to stop the invasion. That rhetoric is very strong. Is it right?
It is, absolutely. I voted Conservative for 30 years, and after what they've done for the past the past 5 or 6 years in government, I'm not looking to vote for them again for a while.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? Sorry, I was just going to say, Chris Phillips out there, he's been on a boat looking at illegal immigration, and when I see it, I think, well, this is a bit rich because you were in government.
Yeah, absolutely. They caused it, and to be honest, we're at a stage now, David, where I don't think we've got any alternative other than to try a different party to see whether they can get a grip of the issues that we've got. Labour can't do it. You know, we've had 2 years so far and nothing's changed. In fact, things probably have got worse. The Tories made a hell of a mess of it. So to me, you know, we've no alternative other than to give reform a chance and see what happens. It can't be any worse than it is now.
I mean, just very quickly, we spoke about this earlier. Do you think cancelling the Rwanda scheme was a mistake by Starmer?
Yeah. Oh, his biggest mistake. If he'd have kept that scheme going and used his brain and thought, OK, well, we're not going to be able to send these people back to France because France don't want them.
No.
They love the fact that they're coming over on boats. They're doing everything they can. You know, they're almost putting the life jackets on for them and zipping them up, and then they're putting them in the boat.
They are, yeah.
You know what I mean? They don't want them in France. And the only way that we can stop this is we've got to have some serious deterrents. And Rwanda would have been one of them, because if you're not going to pay £2,500 to some smuggler to jump in a boat, risk your life coming across the channel, maybe with your wife or your child, or probably in most cases on your own, and then find that some border guard is going to pick you up, stick you on a boat, and then within a few weeks you're going to be on a plane to Rwanda.
Yeah.
You're not going to come over.
But you see, this is the bit I don't understand. Why did Starmer cancel it? Because I think we saw that illegal migrants had migrated back to the Republic of Ireland, back into the EU. I would have done exactly what you say. I would have let that play out, see what the effect of Rwanda was. It was all in place, but he couldn't do it because of ideology.
No, Andy Burnham could do that now. You know, he could reinstate Rwanda tomorrow, effectively, and that would potentially help considerably to solve the problem. But he won't do that. I know that. You know that. And to be honest, we've got no alternative than to have a general election as soon as possible and basically vote for reform and see what they can do with it.
John, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your call this afternoon. Joe is in sunny Brighton. Good afternoon.
Hi, Mr. Bull.
Hello.
Yeah. Margaret Thatcher never mentioned the poll tax in her manifesto, and that's what gave up her prime ministership from the poll tax riots. So at the same time, Reform are being very quiet on Nigel Farage's idea of the National Health Service being privatised.
Let me just interject, because I know, because I wrote the policy, he doesn't want to privatise the health service. He has talked about possibility of looking at healthcare-based or insurance-based systems, but that is not true.
That doesn't work, because if you watch Michael Moore's Sicko, you'll see people having to sell their house for medical bills, ambulances costing £1,000. And have you seen Mark Cuban's research that he found that some healthcare companies have been using companies to do scans for $249 and then charging other healthcare companies $1,200 for the same scan and then billing it to the customer.
I mean, it's a great point, and the cost of healthcare in the US is 10 times the cost it is here. The outcomes are no better.
And the thing about it, most of these companies in Europe who were liberated by an American army, if you look behind the owners of the healthcare insurance systems in Europe, they all go back to American companies. And do you know that when Cameron was in power, a certain United, that's all I'm going to say, had offices here thinking that he would push through US-type health insurance. When they couldn't get their own way, David Cameron said, I couldn't push it through. They left the country. But what I'm trying to say, most parties do things what are not in their manifesto.
Right.
And the fact is, that's what governors. Trump has done a million things what he never mentioned what he was going to do. So all this thing about we need new general election, why would you do it, Mr. Bull? You watch your enemies pull themselves apart like Jack has done in the Green Party and the mistakes of Reform's donor. Watch for 2.5 years, and then you'll have an argument to go to the public. Do you want parties what do this? Do you want parties what do that? Or do you want a party what's been governing? And you're going to choose the one who's not making those crazy mistakes. And Reform are making a lot of crazy announcements. They should know, being members of the Tory party, ex-members, that...
They're not all ex-Tory members.
But what you'll find, Mr. Bull, is that Theresa May got rid of 10 Coast Guard boats. Italy's got 50. We're always saying that we're a rich country. We got rid of our Coast Guard boats. We got rid of experienced border force staff because they didn't want to pay their pensions. Same with the Met. They got rid of experienced officers. They got rid of all these special intelligence units in London to help with the crime. That's what the Tories did. And
right.
what I can see, I can't see the civil service working for reform. They would never do what reform said.
Well, isn't the point of the civil service to work for the governing party?
Not if the problem is, listen on this one. We saw how the EU treated Farage and all the other people on the right. Most of the civil service are made up of people who are usually university educated, and they're not going to work for a party, especially even France. I'm going to say, why should I work with a party what's so xenophobia? And
I don't recognise that description of the party.
Well, you know, the thing, to me, right, I grew up in an area in London where we had National Front marches and they got always ran out, like what happens in Brighton. Every time they come to Brighton, the far right get ran out, or Fatboy Slim does a DJ set and drown them out. What I'm trying to say to you, it will never work, because why would I want to invest in your country? Because, you know, Qatar doesn't send students to Britain anymore because they're scared of the crime and the racial tension. They're sending their students to Los Angeles, Miami now for English lessons. If we keep on baiting foreigners saying we don't like them, we will lose investment. See, Trump gets away with it because they got the tech giants. So Saudi Arabia will invest and all the countries will invest, but they don't have to with UK. We've lost our GDP because we sold off all our important companies. Like Digital was quite big in the computer arena, and then we sold it to Fujitsu. Margaret Thatcher allowed to sell off all important companies where the GDP would have been paid here, not to an offshore island.
Well, I will counter that, because I'm old enough to remember what it was like in the 70s, where we didn't have any services, where we had national strikes. And what Thatcher did is she actually made Britain work again. And I think many people listening and watching this programme would agree with that.
OK, during the 70s, we had very little rights. And so, yes, some of the union bosses did take the P, and yes, some people did play late, but the majority of the time we had very poor workers' rights. And if we want to bring that back again, like P&Q sacking people and then rehiring them under a different payment scheme and system, we don't want that. That's the same as the 70s. Bosses did what they want, sacked people on a whim. Now we've got protections, and people are voting for things against their own thingies. Before I go, David Ball, have you seen the video with Femi Oluwa going to Clapton?
No.
He asked this watch it, it's called Femi Oluwa Goes to Clapton. The guy realises, he says, I'm paying for my mum's sickness with my sister. We've got 14 days to pay, or the bailiffs will come for her care at home, because they have to get the money. And then he said, then Femi said, do you realise Nigel has an interest in wanting to put an insurance-based system in? And then he realises, is that true? I didn't know that. Maybe I need to think again with my vote, because he's got 3 times he said it, and,
well, look,
and said it in a word to round.
I can't be clearer to say, given that I wrote Reform UK's health policy, that is not policy. The policy is the NHS remains free at the point of delivery.
He said it in UKIP.
I see. Well, that was a very long time ago. Listen, I have to go. Joe, thank you very much for the call. I'll have to go and look at the video that you mentioned. Right, keep all those messages coming in, please. Lots coming in about obesity. Very quickly, Richard in Birmingham says, whenever discussions on obesity take place, it seems the usual armchair experts appear spouting there's only one cause of obesity. Rubbish. It's far more complicated than that, and cutting down on calorie intake won't work for everyone. I really, really wish it was that easy. If it was, I wouldn't have had to suffer the last 15 years of my pathetic, wasted life. That's really tragic, Richard. I send you my best wishes, Richard. On that note, let's go to a break. After the break, I'm going to be talking about something that drives me potty. It seems that people think it's OK to blare out music on public transport. What do you think? We'll be talking to Norman Baker, the former Transport Secretary, after this break. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk, 3:37. So many messages and calls coming in. Right, I'm asking, based on what's been going on to people in politics, what price do we put on democracy? Would you be willing to spend, say, £100 million protecting frontline politicians, which we are seeing in the wake of David Amess, Joe Cox, the terrible tragedy of Anne Widdecombe as well? It's something that I'm very, very aware of, obviously with my background in politics and many of my friends being frontline politicians. Would you be prepared to spend that kind of money? Do you think politicians should have more protection? Would you become a politician, given what is really a very toxic environment at the moment? And the other question I want to know is, should a manifesto change actually trigger a general election? This is about Andy Burnham tacking dramatically left. And if you then go into a budget in October and then say, right, we need another £35 billion, which, by the way, no one voted for, should that actually trigger a general election? The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word Talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X at talkTV. You can send us a voice note. Get in touch however you like. Now, lots of other stories, but this one caught my eye this morning. This is about what I am seeing more and more in London. And there's an article in The Spectator saying, is blaring out music on the bus really quintessentially social? Now, it goes on to say, while chatting to strangers on public transport remains taboo, open season seems to have been declared when it comes to pumping out tinny tunes, brain-deadening TikToks on the musings of a mumbling halfwit on the other end of a phone. This apparently is called loudcasting. You're not kidding. TfL, Transport for London, did a survey. 70% of respondents found sounds emitting from a fellow passenger's devices to be a nuisance. The remaining 30% are angling for deportation, according to this under Rupert Lowe's ever-expanding remit. The point is that I travel a lot by public transport, and I'm absolutely amazed that people think it's OK to listen to music loudly on a speaker or have a conversation with the speaker on whilst you're sitting next to them, and they don't seem anything wrong with it. Joining me now, Norman Baker, former Transport Secretary. Good afternoon, Norman.
Hello, David.
Am I just a grumpy old man?
Well, if you are, then I am as well, because I share your view on this matter. It's very antisocial, and people seem to not have a regard for other people, and that's the nub of the problem, whether it's very loud music, whether it's phone conversations, whether it's just leery behaviour. They don't seem to think about other people and whether or not they might be inconvenienced, embarrassed, or just generally upset about what's going on. And that's the difference, because go back, I don't know, decades, this wouldn't have happened. And had it happened, a passenger would have said to the person making the noise, excuse me, would you turn that down, please? And nobody does that now because they're frightened of the consequences.
Quite right. Now, this blurb here goes on to say that this is a fascinating human phenomenon of marking social territory. I've never heard so much guff in my life.
Well, I suppose it's just a way of people saying, I can do what I want and sod you, because that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, well, I'd agree with that. And it goes on to say the comparison is like a dog urinating on a lamppost. I mean, I actually think, just setting that aside, the standards of behaviour on public transport is pretty deplorable. I've watched kids putting their feet on the seats. I've told people to take their feet off the seats. The fact is they're swinging from the grab rails and so on. They're not standing up to give elderly people a seat. All of this is wrong. Where did it go wrong, do you think?
I don't know. It's been a long, slow decline over 20 or 30 years, I think. And it's because I think that people have become more selfish, and because people who would otherwise have intervened and said, do you mind not doing that, are now frightened of doing so. And that gives people the green light to behave even more reprehensibly. And of course, there's no comeback on this. You know, you can pass a law to make it illegal to do this, or you can introduce fines, but no one's going to enforce them. So that's worthless in a way. The only safeguard you can have is other passengers who take it upon themselves to try to say that's not satisfactory. You know, sometimes it works. I mean, I was on the train the other day, and somebody was making a very loud phone call, a long distance train, and I interrupted them and said, you know, I understand you want to do this, and it's not a quiet coach, so I can't stop you doing this, but are you going to carry on? Because if you are moving coaches. And he looked terribly chastened and actually cut this conversation down.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's the immediacy, I suppose, of telephones and social media and all the rest of it. And I've been in restaurants where people answer the phone whilst they're having dinner.
Yes, I know. If you go back to, I think you remember, David, Candid Camera.
Oh, my goodness, yes, that does date me.
I love Candid Camera. And there was an episode there of somebody having a conversation, not a real conversation, about an affair they were having. And that was regarded as extraordinary, and that was suitable for a situation comedy. I mean, the thing is, that happens all the time now.
I agree. And if you remember Dom Jolly, do you remember him when the mobile phones first appeared? He walked around with a massive phone shouting hello into it. And
yes.
we have gone back into that. Is it, but is it the parents should be telling these kids, this is not okay?
Well, of course the parents should, and you talk about kids grabbing handrails and generally behaving in a bad way. That, of course, is bad parenting, and they don't stop the kids doing what they want to do. But it's not just kids. I mean, I don't want to say it's a younger generation. In many cases, the younger generation is better behaved than the older generation.
Well, that's true. I mean, I was just reading some of these academics. Orla Muldoon at Queen's University Belfast says, actually, this, whatever it's called, loudcasting, is quintessentially social, to play music and hope your peers appreciate it. Let me tell you, Orla, I do not appreciate it, and I don't want it broadcast, thanks very much. Let's move on to a second story, though. This is facial recognition to be trialled at tube stations. This is an interesting one in terms of civil liberties. So live facial recognition cameras are going to be deployed at some of London's tube stations from Tuesday. Transport for London said the technology would identify people on a police watch list to help catch high-harm offenders, those who are wanted for sexual offences, robbery and knife crime. They're going to trial it at key stations for maximum impact based on intelligence and analysis of crime. Images of people who are not a match to the watch list will be automatically and immediately deleted. Now, Big Brother Watch have said, hang on a minute, this is totally dystopian and treats everyone as suspects. But the counter-argument is they're already deploying live facial recognition, aren't they, as trial sites? We've seen it in marches, for example, in celebrations, in, I don't know, pride marches or whatever.
Well, they are, and there are, in fact, more CCTV cameras in London than any other capital city, I think I'm right in saying.
I think you are.
So that's where we are. You know, the issue is not really whether or not people are, in my view, is not whether they're subject to facial recognition. The issue is whether or not there are safeguards in place to make sure that the technology is not abused. And I'm afraid it is abused very heavily in somewhere like China, where the government of the day in China regards it as a tool of social engineering. And if people are spotted crossing the road against a red light as a pedestrian, their son's no longer able to go to university. That sort of sanction is applied. So we don't want to go down that particular road. So I think the importance of having independent scrutiny of this, making sure there's a legal framework, and making sure, as they say, the images are deleted immediately when not required, is important if we're going to have this technology applied.
I think that's a really important point, actually, which is you can't really stop the use of this technology. Anything that keeps women and girls safe on the transport network, and men for that reason, you know, anything that keeps people safe is good. Live facial recognition is a very powerful tool, but I just worry about the data and when it will be used. You mentioned China there and social credit scoring, for example. You know, I'm just deeply nervous that you're now starting to be watched by Big Brother. I don't really trust great government. And, you know, let's say you've been a naughty person and then they cut your carbon credits, you're not allowed to drive, you know, they stop your electric car being charged and then you're not allowed to use the tube. It has to be carefully managed.
It has to be very carefully managed. And, you know, as a Liberal, one of the great challenges, I think, down the centuries is a balance of power between the state and the individual. And I think we're giving the state potentially too much power. So it has to be carefully regulated. But, you know, the governments of the day, you know, not this particular government, but any government can abuse that technology. Individuals within government can abuse that technology. So it has to be very, very carefully monitored and controlled. Otherwise, it can get out of hand.
But who monitors it? That's the issue, isn't it?
Well, there has to be strict regulation put in place by the government. And then it has to be an independent way of checking this, as there is, for example, with some of the security services, to make sure they stick to the law. And there has to be ability to find out what's going on through freedom of information and resort, if necessary, to the courts. That's what has to happen in a democracy.
I wonder if people feel safer with it or not.
Well, they will. I mean, people feel safer with CCTV. Sometimes they're not safer because CCTV cannot be in every single corner. It's not 1984. And therefore, people, for example, who want to commit crime will sometimes choose to do so, but there's no CCTV camera. So it's simply a matter of displacement.
Norman, always good to talk to you. I miss our confrontations on Talk Today many years ago. Norman Baker there, former Transport Secretary, joining me on Talk TV. Gary is in Glasgow. Good afternoon to you.
Hello, David. Listen, I'm a person who plays music on public transport.
Oh.
And I play it with a speaker. I won't tell you the brand, but it's a powerful speaker. It carries the bass, blah, blah, blah. But I'll tell you, I also play it in Sainsbury's, and I also, when I go shopping, I also play it in Marks and Spencer's. And nearly everyone thanks me for the music. They let me play in Marks and Spencer's. They let me play while I go and do my shopping in Sainsbury's.
What?
I play it on the bus.
Really?
And I tell you what, they do. And I tell you what, actually, I promise you to God, promise you. I even had people, I haven't used it I haven't been carrying it around for about a month or so. And I've had people come up to me and say, Gary, where is your music? Where is your tunes? And I tell you why they do it. Why? Firstly, it's because, mainly because of the type of music I play. Oh. Okay? So I play reggae, I play soul, I play jazz funk, the old school. If there's elderly people around, I tend to play the 60s, maybe some 50s. I had one guy on a bus one day, and I'm playing the music, and he was a disabled guy. And his carer come on with him, they sat on the bus, and I was playing some music, and he had a smile on his face. And I said, what do you like? He says he likes Elvis Presley. So there I was, YouTube, some Elvis Presley, played it. The bus was rocking. The driver put a smile on the face. The guy got off, it put a smile on the face. It made my day. Now, so I played. I've got no problems with doing it at all. Now, the problem is that some people they don't care of their surroundings, okay? So they will play it through their phones and they don't care, whatever. If somebody come up to me and says, would you mind turning it down or whatever, I'll turn it down.
Yeah.
It's no big deal.
But there's a big difference. Isn't there a big difference between what you're doing? You're playing music for the benefit of others, whereas the sort of examples I'm talking about, they're playing music or having a live conversation for the benefit of themselves.
No, it's for myself. Honestly, it's for myself.
Why? Because you derive joy?
Yeah, and because of the music I play, it's not the pop music or the chart music where most people will hear whatever. The music I play goes back, I don't know, let's say 70s disco or some reggae or some dancehall or some lovers rock, if you know what I'm talking about. All that type of stuff, especially the reggae, the non-Bob Marley stuff. The people love it. They absolutely do love it. So hands up, I'm one of those people who, honestly, if you heard me on the bus, it would put a smile on your face. I had one lady come out of Sainsbury's. I walked out of Sainsbury's one day, and she came up behind me and she said, "Thank you very much. You put a smile on my face."
Well, that's rather lovely, isn't it?
Not always bad.
Well, Gary, I look forward to seeing you on the bus. Gary, thank you very much for your call. That's Gary in Glasgow there. Keep all your messages coming in, please. Final part after the break. Don't go anywhere. This is Talk.
Days running.
Not so small boat crisis. And there's a picture of the boat. And they've got a little little wording in a little circle that says picture continued on the back, and they've actually put it, it's so big they've put it across the front page and the back page of the newspaper. I mean, this is absolutely huge.
It is. By definition it is. It's and they're getting bigger all the time.
Getting bigger. What's
not
the
really
next
sure
one?
that you can call it a small boats crisis anymore.
It's
That
a
seems
49-foot dinghy.
We've been on the beaches
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk Final Part. 8 minutes to 4. Maria's on the line from Gloucestershire. Good afternoon, Maria.
Oh, hi, good afternoon. I've forgotten what I was going to say, actually.
Oh, okay, right.
No. Basically, it's about reform and the polls and everything.
Yes.
And they hadn't, some guy was saying, oh, well, they're not doing this and they haven't got that ready. But you see, now, look, I was at the impression that we were going to be waiting at least 3 years before there's another election.
Well, that's what John Curtis told me yesterday on this very programme,
Yeah. And they are, at the moment, working really hard to put together different people to cover all these headings. And if you are in the Reform Party, you will know that they have got one of those, what they call it,
manifesto?
No, when they YouTube.
Reform TV, yeah.
Yeah, they got one, and they go on it every day, and they change it, and they add things to it as well. So if you are actually a Reform candidate member, you would know that anyway. So
I think the caller was saying that essentially he wanted a broadening of the policy portfolio. So he wanted to see more people in those jobs. I think there are 4 that have currently been announced, plus Nigel Farage himself. So obviously, I suppose he was pushing for more shadow cabinet positions, if you're going to call it a shadow cabinet.
Yeah, but at the moment, there's not going to be an election, is there?
Well, we don't know. I mean, do we?
At the end of the day, they do have quite a lot of people in place.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got quite a few people in place. And Lee Anderson has just come back from France. He's been there for quite a few days, dealing with all that side of it. So quite a few of them are actually out at the moment doing things for reform and to build up their portfolio. Because it's like as Burnham, whatever his face is, right? He doesn't explain anything of what he's doing.
Well,
what's he doing?
No, well, that's very true. And of course, he's the Prime Minister. He's been in the job for, 3 weeks? He's spent 2 weeks.
He doesn't tell you anything.
No, he's on a listening tour going around the country, listening.
Oh my God! I'm gonna get 2% off my VAT. Wow, whoopie doo-dah.
Yeah, well, it's going to change your life, isn't it?
Yeah,
and he's capping your bus fares at £2. So I mean, look.
Wow. Well, I'm disabled, so that don't make any difference to me. I can't go on about.
Okay. Very good. Well, very nice to talk to you, Maria. That's Maria in Gloucestershire. I just want to tell you this story in case you have just joined us. This is brilliant. Donald Trump. There were fears about his security, and Donald Trump, you can see here if you're watching on YouTube. So Donald Trump is leaving. This is on Air Force One. He was leaving the NATO summit in Ankara. Here he is. He's going up the steps. He goes to the top. He waves. Now, American intelligence agencies had flagged a plot by Iranian proxy forces to target the president's plane. So this is rather brilliant. So look, Donald Trump, statutory wave, there we are, wave, gets on Air Force One. Now, it looks like he goes into Air Force One. All the journalists get onto Air Force One, but no, he doesn't. What he does, he goes out the other side of the plane. Here, what they're showing is the journalists getting onto the back of the plane here. And then if it zooms in, I hope, here you go, you can see that it's a food truck, which we're used to seeing on aircraft. Donald Trump gets into the food truck, is then deboarded off Air Force One. He is then taken off to a Boeing 757, which is US Air Force C-32A, because of the risk to his life. They even had a very different call sign as well. So no one knew that Donald Trump was not on that plane, including the closest sources in the White House. And the journalists certainly didn't realise that the president was no longer on Air Force One. And by the way, if the president isn't on Air Force One, it's not called Air Force One, because that's its call sign. I think that's rather brilliant. You could... I was talking to Charlie Rowley about it. You could make a movie about that, and that swap was executed on the direct advice of the US Secret Service. Details of intelligence warnings regarding the threat were hidden, even, as I was saying, from senior members of Congress and also from most White House staff. Brilliant, brilliant. They were also concerned about anxieties surrounding a $400 million Boeing 747-8 given to the US by Qatar because they felt the defensive missile countermeasures were inferior. Not something most of us have to worry about. Lots of other messages, just very quickly coming in. When discipline in schools, when discipline in schools and homes goes, self-discipline also disappears. Hence the rise in antisocial behaviour and petty crime like vandalism and shoplifting. Love the show. Miss your Sunday update email. Ah, I know what you're talking about. That's very sweet of you. Thank you very much for that. Also, this one talks about electricity prices being very high. The problem with electricity prices is that electricity suppliers charge you on the price of gas. And that's right, electricity is pegged to the price of gas. And as I was saying, electricity is terribly expensive in this country, and I wish it wasn't. I think all of us wish it wasn't, and that would solve a lot of problem. Kev, I think, is...
I'm here.
Vaguely.
I am here.
Are you here?
I'm here, yes.
Excellent.
Definitely. I'm very worried about this Burnham guy. He deflects, doesn't he? He deflects from the issues that we want to talk about. He's actually just announced that his favourite smells are fried eggs, sausages and bacon.
Groundbreaking.
Last week, this isn't a bread roll, this is a barn. We don't care, Andy.
No, we don't.
Stop this TikTok nonsense and start addressing the issues that concern
and start
the
governing,
people.
yeah.
You know, so what's he said in the last 24 hours?